Mr. McClellan, Mr. Cabot, Mr. Hazlett, Mr. Ucker, Mr. Elliott, Ms. Allen.
Quorum is present, so today is April the 28th, 2026, the time is 5 p.m. And this is a special call meeting of the Mercer County Joint Planning and Zoning Commission. No old business to discuss. Purpose of our meeting is to do business is item 1, public hearing on proposed text amendment to the city of Mercer, Mercer County zoning ordinances concerning data centers.
What this ordinance does is it creates an industrial technology, better known as an IT zone. In the county, it would be confined to a 1.5 mile radius from the driveway to the ground. And in the city, it would be confined to a zone IT. Currently, there are no zones IT. This is the ordinance just to establish the permitted uses in an IT district and the accessory uses in an IT district. And it's also without the definitions of an IT zone. I'd like for our attorney, Henry Smith, he's going to say a few words, kind of an overlay. This ordinance was rolled out 2 weeks ago, so hopefully everybody has had plenty of time to look it over, read it, and come prepared to discuss it.
Mr. Chair, I think it's worth noting that we heard a lot of concerns from this community back at our input meeting in February. We have a few different models of ordinances that we worked from. We had one provided by a consultant. We had another model provided by Mr. Granny from the Kentucky Resources Council. And these offered some different ways to approach data centers, whether it be by zone change, a conditional use permit that would go to the Board of Adjustment, or an overlay district where data centers would be permitted upfront. What we ultimately adopted that we have before us tonight to hear and discuss is something that requires a zone change. We were approached by community members during this process. We had suggestions from them, including moratorium, amendment to our comprehensive plan. I put some work into adapting the ordinance model that we had. There was significant revision and other effort from commissioner volunteers. They put hours of study into the matter, and I anticipate some revisions even from the get-go of what we have tonight, going proofreading. There would be references to when certain studies are provided during the application process, and of course, we will listen with attentive ears to adopt some of the changes that are suggested to us tonight. So, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Henry. We'll begin with the speakers. Attorney Grady, if you would, I'll turn it over to you, if you would. Take your time. I'm not going to hold you to the 3 minutes. You just let me know when you're finished.
Mr. Chairman, I'm having a difficult time hearing you. The microphone is not quite as clear as I would like. Can you hear me? Now, I think you said I have 3 minutes. I had hoped to have 10 minutes.
You take it, Mr. Gray, you take as much time as you need, okay?
I need 10 minutes, okay? Members of the Planning Commission, I have submitted a written 10-page double-spaced Times New Roman memo to you. I think that's unusually formal, but I have submitted it, and I hope that it meets your criteria. I did submit 2 additional articles. These are scientific journals articles, peer-reviewed articles on low-frequency noise. And I submitted these in my cover letter. My explanation for submitting these, in addition to the 10-page comments, is that when I had the opportunity to meet with the working group, Mr. Elliott expressed some concern about not having enough science support for the need to regulate low-frequency noise. And I promised that I would provide some additional scientific justification for a zoning ordinance that regulates low-frequency noise. So I've attached 2 articles to my comments, and I have included a portion of one of the articles within the comments, and I would ask that the commission modify the rules or whatever and allow those 2 articles to be filed with my comments. Now, members of the Planning Commission, on behalf of We Are Mercer County, I want to thank you first for your 4-hour effort in February to listen to this community. I also want to give you personal thanks for allowing me to have a half an hour, 45 minutes to meet with the working group on April 8th to talk about some specific topics that I will be referencing in my comments to you. Your April 14th, 2026 draft proposed zoning ordinance related to data centers is a helpful first step. It is a beginning, but it is not adequate for this community. It needs more work, and I'm going to try to identify the areas that I think are most critical in order to get this document in the form that it can protect the resources of this community and the people of this community before it is sent to the fiscal court. I think that there are several omissions, provisions that need to be removed or modified, and protections that property owners and residents in this community need, and they're missing. There are 2 important features that I want to call out, one very positive and one very negative. The first positive, under Development Standards, page 5, section I, you have a county limit. Section I says cumulative combined acreage zoned IT in the unincorporated Mercer County and the city of Harrisburg shall not exceed 1,500 acres. That is a positive feature of this proposed ordinance. Unfortunately, you have not gone through the comprehensive plan process, so this figure does not have any community support for it at this stage, and it doesn't have any analysis to support it. That's why it's important to go through the comprehensive plan process and get input and do the kind of analysis that the comprehensive plan process calls for, so that you have a record that will support putting this number in your ordinance. So I think this is an important positive. I'm glad to see it. It's something we talked about on April 8th when I met with you all and with Henry. And so I thank you for including it. But it is right now vulnerable to attack because it has no foundation, because it has not gone through the comprehensive plan process. That's the positive, one positive. The negative. The next sentence, section 2I. This is the section that identifies an area with a 1.5 mile radius centered at the entrance to E.W. Brown. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. It's on page 2 of my written comments. I think you're familiar with it. This 1.5 mile radius circle would bring data centers to the entrance of Shaker Village. This is terrible planning. This is also an arbitrary area without public input or support and without any land use planning analysis. Please remove this section entirely. Both of these provisions illustrate the serious flaw in the methodology that the Planning Commission has used. The Planning Commission is attempting to zone without planning. Kentucky law is clear. Planning must precede zoning. KRS 100-201 mandates that a county cannot begin to enact zoning ordinance until it completes the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, can adopt interim ordinance, but it cannot adopt a zoning ordinance until it has completed the comprehensive plan. The point is, planning must precede zoning, and you all, in this case, have done it in reverse. I asked the working group when I met with you to take a timeout on moving forward with the ordinance and begin the process of amending the comprehensive plan. The purpose of doing that is to determine what is the need in this community for data centers, how many acres do you need, and you've arrived at 1,500 without going through any public participation or analysis. It almost looks like it was pulled out of the air because we have no explanation. The planning process is the way you answer that. And you also need, in the comp planning process, to define better what areas in the county are the areas where we want data centers. The comprehensive plan process has not been followed. I urge you to pause this ordinance writing process and amend the comprehensive plan so that it addresses data centers, so that your zoning ordinance would be in agreement with the comprehensive plan. Right now, you're adopting a zoning ordinance without any comprehensive plan justification for data centers. So coming out of the chute, your ordinance violates your comprehensive plan because your comprehensive plan is silent on data centers. So why would you begin the process with an ordinance that's already liable to be under attack? First, amend the plan. Then, when the plan addresses data centers, write the ordinance that implements the plan. I would note that the circle of a 1.5 mile radius, I think, contains 4,523 acres. So in one sentence, you have a cap of 1,500 acres. In the next sentence, you authorize a circle of 4,500 acres for data centers. I mean, these do not match. And I urge you to go back to the drawing board, first delete the circle, and then convene the comprehensive planning process. And when you have finished it, finish work on the ordinance. Page 4 of my letter, my second request to the working group on April 8th was that you ask the fiscal court for a moratorium. This is a logical request when this needs more time, and you all, I think, are rushing to meet a deadline, and I don't think there's any need to rush. This county, I think, wants you to take the time and do it right. And I think my clients feel like you all are rushing this for some reason that baffles us. What we need is a moratorium, a timeout on any applications until the comprehensive plan is amended and the ordinance that protects the community is recommended from you to the fiscal court and enacted. My third request to you was that you can use the conditional use process. I put that in writing. It's nowhere for me to hear for me, so I regret that you're not using it. I think it is a way to protect the community better than the tools you've got. My fourth request was I asked the Planning Commission to address the matter of who pays. And I want to compliment, sort of, under Development Standards, page 3, section 1, you have language about reimbursing $200,000 to $300,000 of engineering expense. I think it's a good idea, but I don't understand why it is reimbursed. I would recommend that you put in the ordinance a filing fee of $200,000 so that when an applicant comes in, they put their money on the table so that you can hire the experts you need to review the application using their filing fee. Not using your own money and then asking them to reimburse. So to me, you're making your job more difficult by not putting the burden on the applicant to pay all of the costs, not only of the application, but of decommissioning, which is, I'll mention in a minute. The ordinance as written does not allocate the costs as I think I would recommend you do. My fifth request, and this is the largest part of my letter, and I don't know how I'm doing on my 10 minutes, but I've got a couple of more minutes I would like. My fifth request is that you would, thank you. I'm glad. That's wonderful. I can hear so much better now. My fifth request to you was that your noise prevention section must regulate low frequency noise. Previous speakers in February 18th, Dr. Angel and others brought this to your attention. Noise under your ordinance as currently written completely ignores low frequency noise. And it is nowhere mentioned in the environmental impact statement except as it relates to truck traffic. I have incorporated in my letter language that Dr. Angel has also sent you justifying the need to regulate low frequency noise. I've also included in my letter proposed ordinance language. This is on page 6 of my letter, and I would recommend that you consider this language. And I've included in my letter his conclusion. This has a threat to the community, and regulating low frequency noise is necessary to meet the guarantee of quiet enjoyment of people's property in this room and in this community. They should be free from the hum of low frequency noise from these kinds of facilities. And I believe it's incumbent upon the Planning Commission to include low frequency noise in your regulation. It is not there. I've included some pages from Alva's article. I'll skip over those. I want to get to page 9. One of the most glaring omissions from the proposed text is, regrettably, the failure to expressly protect prime farmland and farmland of statewide importance. This was the overwhelming theme of many commenters on February 18th. The proposed model zoning text from the Kentucky Resources Council, including language directing data centers away from productive farmland. This omission must be corrected, especially where this issue is so prominent in your comprehensive plan and was so important to so many Mercer County residents and property owners in February. I closed my February comments to you by citing from your comprehensive plan. I'll cite those pages again, page 9, page 19, page 39, page 120, and your future land use map. I think that your setback requirement of 750 feet is not sufficient, especially where you're not regulating low frequency noise. If you don't regulate low frequency noise, the only protection is larger setbacks. I'm recommending 1,500 feet. I think other commenters will recommend 2,000 feet in order to protect people's residents so they don't have to live with a permanent hum 24/7 in their home. I do think you make an oblique reference to the facade of Shaker Village. I would delete that reference. I don't think that's appropriate. You do recommend community benefit agreement. I'm in strong support of that. I'm glad to see it. And I would add that you add more text to it so you spell it out in more detail. I saw the industrial water system. I welcome the detail, but I do not see that you're calling for a closed loop system, which my understanding is a much more efficient system. And I question why you are not mandating a closed loop system. I support your clean energy reference under item 18 under development standards, but I would urge you to make that section stronger. And finally, I requested that you include a decommissioning requirement. to include bonding to ensure the county and other public entities are not left to clean up costs. This is common sense and prudent. It's missing from this proposal. That omission is not responsible. It needs to be added. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Our next speaker will be Randy Slovo.
I'm going to try something because when I saw Kaylee do this, I heard her a lot better. So I'm going to take this out and put it closer to where I'm talking from, my big mouth. That's okay. All right. Is that better? Everybody? Okay. My name is Randy Strovo. My law firm represents Shaker Village. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today and for your work to address these issues. I know how much work you put into it. Writing an ordinance that long, that amount of information is very difficult to do. We did it on behalf of Shaker, and hopefully you all had a chance to read through the ordinance that we proposed as well. A lot of what I was going to talk about, Hank already did, so that will make my comments even shorter, but I had prepared for about 3 to 4 minutes of time, so I'll be hopefully a little bit less than that today. If you haven't yet, please review our comment letter as well as the letter submitted by Greg Dale. He's the planning expert that's been advising Shaker Village on these issues. To the extent that I can, I'd like to incorporate those letters into my testimony here today. And I'd like to make about 3 points with my short time. First, planning is a prerequisite to zoning, as you heard Hank eloquently speak about earlier. Second, the proposed ordinance puts irreplaceable assets like prime farmland, conservation sites, historical sites like Shaker Village at risk. And third, a moratorium is necessary to carry out the planning process in an effective way and in a legal way. Going to the first point, planning before zoning. Under Kentucky law, as Hank said, Mercer County must amend its comp plan first to properly study and guide data center development before passing the zoning ordinance that you're trying to pass right currently. Under KRS Chapter 100, planning is the fundamental prerequisite to zoning. I haven't cited my cases. I won't cite them here in my oral comments, but in our letter, we cite the numerous cases, numerous statutes that adequately define and call for planning before zoning. While data centers are an essential part of modern digital infrastructure, they represent a massive, highly specific use of land, energy, and resources. And because of data centers' unprecedented scale and the fact that these are irreversible decisions that you're about to make when it comes to your ordinance, Mercer County must ensure it's fully prepared before moving forward. A planning unit cannot arbitrarily create a zoning district to permit a high-impact use, like hyperscale data centers or data centers of various sizes, and specify where that use should be with a 1.5 mile radius or on state roads currently in historic corridors without first laying that groundwork that the comprehensive planning process is designed to do. The comprehensive planning process has been around for decades. It's effective. It works in other communities. And when you have a large land use like this, the best way forward is to do that planning process first and then zone. These decisions must also be made with sufficient research and input from the community. This isn't just me talking. It's not advocates talking. It's what the law says. I believe you all haven't amended your comprehensive plan in some time. The law says you're supposed to amend it or at least review it every 5 years. This is the perfect opportunity to do so. Without that clear planning framework, the resulting zoning regulations are not only incomplete, in our view, short-sighted, but they're also potentially unlawful. Second, protecting irreplaceable sites and uses. With the current draft 1.5 mile zone that we heard Hank already talk about, it targets over almost 5,000 acres for industrial data centers without adequate protections or setbacks for prime farmland, conservation lands, and historic sites like Shaker Village. In the very least, that provision should be eliminated, as should the preference to building in historic corridors. That is essentially what you're doing in the zoning ordinance, is isolating these 5,000 acres, which is exactly what the planning process is for. Not the zoning process, the planning process. You're isolating almost 5,000 acres closest to some of your most precious resources in the county without going through the planning process first. It's reversed. You're trying to do it through zoning, and you should be doing it through comprehensive planning. Billy, hopefully will talk right after me, more about Shaker Village here in a moment. But many important sites like Shaker Village are inseparable from the surrounding cultural, historical, agricultural landscapes and settings that Mercer County is so famous and so well known for. We need those robust protections, including specific prohibitions on prime farmland. And in our view, tiered setbacks and regulations. If you look at our ordinance, we try to provide some flexibility for the county to properly regulate data centers in this area and to properly set back from historic properties and conservation lands of Shaker Village, as proposed in that ordinance, and we submitted to you about 2 weeks ago. And thirdly, a moratorium is necessary. Like Hank said again, a temporary pause for planning will allow the community to properly assess infrastructure demands, fiscal impacts, and land use consequences rather than rushing to an irreversible decision. Now, since I have a little bit of time, I think I'm going to read a short part from Greg Dale's letter. And I encourage all of you to read that letter. He's a very effective planning expert who's been doing work all across the state of Kentucky on data centers and other uses. He's a frequent visitor to Mercer County. He went to school in Georgetown. He's based in northern Kentucky and Cincinnati. But he's expertly astute to deal with this issue. But this is from his letter. The future of data centers in Mercer County is not just a regulatory issue. It is a broad planning issue, perhaps the single most impactful and complicated land use issue the county has ever faced, Mercer County. Before adopting zoning regulations, it is essential to undertake a planning process that is responsible, thorough, inclusive, and transparent. This process should clearly evaluate the full spectrum of potential benefits and drawbacks, consider both intended and unintended consequences, and account for broader community impacts, all while being grounded in meaningful community consensus. Without a clear planning framework, zoning regulations are likely to be incomplete, short-sighted, and I will add, not be in compliance with KRS Chapter 100. In conclusion, we encourage the Commission to pause this ordinance, follow the statutory planning process, give the community the necessary time to properly amend the comp plan, and develop an ordinance that is truly in the best interest of Mercer County's residents, businesses, and irreplaceable local sites and resources like Shaker Village. Thank you. Can I bring Billy up here next? Is that okay? Can I bring Billy up here next? Is that okay? Well, he was behind me originally. It'd be helpful just for continuity. But if not, it's up to you.
I want to remind everybody, if you do plan on speaking, I need you to set one of the triggers, and then also
Was it better to speak like this into the microphone?
yeah. When you do, I need you to say your name and address, and your time will begin. You have 3 minutes. Start after you.
Thank you. Billy Rankin, 3501 Lexington Road. Thank you to the Commission and to the committee that worked on the draft ordinance related to data centers. I know you've spent long hours on this process, and these conversations have not been easy, but the time you're spending listening to our feedback is appreciated. As president of a significant cultural site like Shaker Village, one of my responsibilities is to balance what should be protected and what should be used. These choices aren't always easy, but the experience that I have has taught me that the best decisions come from research, listening to a variety of opinions, and never sacrificing long-term sustainability for short-term gains. I know, however, that innovation is necessary for progress. In the 1960s, the group that founded our nonprofit to preserve and share Pleasant Hill, they were innovators. They wanted to protect Kentucky's history and increase tourism to Mercer County. And they set out to create one of the most unique places in all of America. Over 65 years and 10 million visitors later, their success is undeniable. And I still look at them for inspiration. Today, guests travel to Shaker Village from all over the world. They enjoy educational programs, farm fresh food, southern hospitality, and connecting with nature. On our grounds, countless springs burst out of the karst terrain, including the famous waterfall at the old Shaker pulling mill site. We've surveyed over 130 species of migratory birds at our property. Monarch butterflies tagged at Shaker Village have been photographed at the end of their journey in Mexico. And most recently, the endangered tricolored bat has been identified and studied in caves on the southeast portion of our property. These caves and the fields around them fall within the 1.5-mile radius your current ordinance defines as suitable without limitation for a new IT district. On behalf of the past and future generations that will love and care for Shaker Village, I want you to consider the following. As you've heard tonight, you have to plan before you zone. Put a moratorium on data centers until you can research fully and update the comprehensive plan. Using an updated comprehensive plan, then develop an ordinance to guide your decision-making about the compatibility and appropriateness of a data center in our county. I have faith that if you follow this process, you will come to understand that the land that spans from Harrodsburg to the Harrington Lake and to the Kentucky River is some of the most significant historic, prehistoric, geological, agricultural, and biological land our entire state has to offer. The generations that come after us will judge you not by just what you build, but by what you choose not to destroy.
Mindy Hill is on deck.
Okay. Erin Petrie, 644 Tally Road, 40502. My name is Erin Petrie, and I'm a congressional candidate running to represent the 6th Congressional District, which includes Mercer County. I was asked to come here today to provide expert testimony on this matter by multiple residents of Mercer County as a candidate who has called for a full moratorium on data centers in Kentucky. For a little background, I have spent nearly a decade working in renewable energy and corporate sustainability. My last professional role was with Amazon Web Services, the largest operator of hyperscale data centers in the world. My job there was to lead all voluntary global sustainability reporting for data centers, so I know a thing or two about how the largest hyperscaler thinks about sustainability. But I am here to make expert commentary on the proposed draft ordinance for the industrial technology zone. After reviewing the draft ordinance, it includes many standard provisions that I've seen for similar zoning for industrial parks and other construction sites. However, I am disappointed to see the draft manifest more as a negotiation starting point rather than an ordinance with more teeth and specific requirements for resource management and minimizing negative community and environmental impacts. Notably, Section 2 requirements for all IT-zoned parcels, Section 18, is particularly weak. Throughout the ordinance, phrases such as "to the extent reasonably practical" and "encouraged to" lack teeth and open up the community to a lack of clear requirements to mitigate any negative impact. The phrase "strive for environmental sustainability," as someone who has managed AWS global reporting for such data centers, literally means nothing. This assumes the data center developers will act in good faith, which, as we know, usually does not end up well for rural, poor, or minority communities in particular. I'm also alarmed that the draft ordinance does not provide any specific thresholds that could trigger denial of zoning, water, power, or any other approvals or repercussions for failing to meet such thresholds. The ordinance has multiple specifics for setbacks, landscaping, and noise standards, but none when it comes to precious resource utilization. This provides far too many loopholes and not enough guardrails. I would demand that the next draft include requirements such as what environmental sustainability means, minimum requirements for standard data center efficiency like power use effectiveness and water use effectiveness. I have a lot more to say on this matter and much more specifics to offer, but my time is limited. It's clear this draft ordinance is written to favor the data center developers and not the people of the community itself. Even provisions such as rules for power generators do not include what type of fuel is acceptable or unacceptable. This has a significant impact on air quality. Another example is Section 2, Subsection 1, which indicates any data center project over 100 megawatts shall reimburse the city, and that includes edge, enterprise, and colo facilities. It's no secret that data centers are not popular by this community, but if this body wishes to engender any level of trust for ensuring that a data center development will not ruin everything, even though I don't believe we need any more of these in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, we must include more specifics. I ask this body to look to the standards set forth in the European Union around data center development and sustainability, as they are really the gold standards. Anything less is a disservice to the people of Mercer County and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Thank you very much for your time and for consideration of my testimony.
Rhonda Devine,
My name is Mindy Huff, and I live at 2004 Warwick Road. I live roughly 5 miles from E.W. Brown. I moved to Mercer County 10 years ago to my peaceful 5.5 acres. I will preface that I am not a lawyer, I am an accountant, and offer the following. Will Bergen be rejoining planning and zoning? First of all, should that be decided so that they have any input on the ordinance or any updates to the comprehensive plan? Second, the comprehensive plan should be updated first. Otherwise, you have an ordinance that is not in compliance with the comprehensive plan. The location in the draft ordinance also goes against the comprehensive plan. This area is prime historic farmland with springs and aquifers running beneath, as well as a property boundary to Shaker Village, a National Historic Registry landmark which welcomes 100,000 visitors per year and roughly $10 million in revenue. The industrial park with a 1.5-mile radius would be a more appropriate location, which Grayson Evans reports in his February 10th fiscal court update, that is a, quote, more appropriate place for a data center, however less desirable. Third, the solar energy ordinance that's currently in the zoning should be used as a blueprint for what is missing in this draft, addressing the conditional use permit, a filing fee of $100 an acre, a decommissioning bond, road repair security, and project abandonment. Finally, addressing low-frequency sounds. Last week, I was awakened at 3:30 a.m. by a low rumbling sound and vibration. It was a fire truck refilling from the hydrant 50 feet from my front door. It only took one to wake me from a deep sleep. In the same regard, I am miles away from the train tracks, and yet I can routinely tell when one is crossing. Low-frequency sounds travel long distances. Buffers and increasing installation is ineffective. The above examples do not occur 24 hours a day like the sounds from a data center would. Our ordinance should include C-WAVE standards to address this. I have linked a news story about the low-frequency sound emanating from Great Oaks Data Center in Virginia, the data center that was included in Curry Roberts' presentation. 3 years ago, almost 70% of Virginians were on board with the data center. That has dropped to around a low to mid-30% today. My suggestions are that this board and fiscal court slow down and do things in the right order to avoid legal challenges. We continue to request a moratorium. Thank you.
Senator Rivers on this.
Rhonda Devine, 1400 Johnson Road, Harrodsburg, Kentucky. After a full examination in 5 other states, the proposed millions of taxes generated annually to school systems is almost certainly overstated and rests on assumptions that have never held true in comparable data center deals anywhere in America. House Bill 775 was passed in 2025, where Kentucky's General Assembly massively expands data center incentives. Citizens have no rights to know who the actual developer is. The project can proceed behind a limited liability company, and if a payment in lieu of taxes, also known as a pilot agreement, is reached, the public may never know the full terms of the agreement. There is no mechanism for citizens to independently verify revenue projections, and if the deal fails to deliver, there is no public accountability trail. This bill also grants a 50-year sales and use tax exemption to data centers investing in at least $450 million. Typical data center equipment, such as servers, computers, etc., represents 60 to 80% of the total asset value. The equipment is already completely exempt from sales and use tax for 50 years before a single negotiation ever begins. During typical pilot negotiations, school districts are not included. Many pilot payments do not flow to school districts at all. They flow to the municipality and may or may not be shared with schools, which is at the local government discretion. The combination of Kentucky's existing 50-year equipment tax exemption, the near certainty of a heavily discounted pilot agreement, the absence of a named developer, and Kentucky's own non-disclosure policies means the residents are being asked to accept enormous permanent disruption to their community based on a number that no one can verify, and every available comparison suggests is wildly inflated. Mercer County deserves better than a revenue projection built on assumptions. We deserve the strongest legal protections possible and a moratorium given proper time for unknowns to be answered completely to give fair and reasonable projection. Some case studies in Texas losing over $1 billion annually in tax revenue due to state-level tax exemptions for data centers. Georgia, the state is projected to lose $2.5 billion in fiscal year 2026 alone due to data center sales tax exemptions. It's a 664% increase. Virginia tax incentives were originally projected to cost the state $1.54 million in total when it launched in 2008 and now cost $1.6 billion per year statewide. Iowa, the fiscal year 2020, the state was losing $151 million annually in sales and property tax breaks for data centers alone. Data center abatements are the fastest growing category of school revenue loss nationally. We deserve better than empty promises that have nationally been shown to never be delivered to citizens, and we continue to request a moratorium.
Hello, my name is Cass Leonard. Box 147, Willisburg, Kentucky. I'm in Washington County, but my property, I'm a landowner who borders Mercer County, and we also get our water from Mercer County. So we're in a very tight corridor there. And I thank you for the opportunity to present what I submitted earlier to you. Being an advocate for the environment and habitat protections, I present my points that were on record based on research and documented adverse impacts of data centers in other states, one of which I move away from due to the impact of environment and habitats. I respectfully have 4 key points to offer. One is endangered species are found in the proposed impact area. By using the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service IPAC mapping tool, I mapped a 97.44-mile radius around Harrodsburg, ensuring to cover the full vast area of Harrington Lake, the Kentucky River, surrounding rivers and creeks, and underground water sources. That data shows multiple federally protected species in and around Mercer County that would be at risk from major ecological disruption, to include, and I will not go through all the names, but bats, several endangered freshwater mussels, endangered plants, protected migratory birds like the turkey vulture under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of Kentucky 1918, bald and golden eagle protected under the Federal Protection Act, and other birds protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Acts. These are not abstract species. They live in the forests, caves, streams, rivers, and all the systems you are being asked to put at risk, and they have a voice. I also cite the recent federal ruling on nationwide permits issued by the DoD signed January 8, 2026, effective March 2026, under the Endangered Species Act and Clean Water Act, administered by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act and Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899. These rules apply to work in streams, wetlands, and waters in the United States. 2, the habitat disruption from AI data centers across the country have created heat islands, raising soil and local water temperatures and reducing oxygen levels and fundamentally altering the ecosystems. This damage is irreversible on human timescales and miles beyond the fence line. I ask what happens to the migratory birds and animals that return every year to nest in their habitat when everything has been cooked, paved, and dried out. I have many that come to my farm every year. 3, Mercer's draft plan lacks explicit protections. The current draft plan contains no specific enforceable framework for mitigating habitat loss and ecosystem damage from an AI data center of this magnitude. There is no real due diligence language for habitat, sustainable water for wildlife, agriculture, or human life at this scale. Other county plans of research do better to protect its people, farms, and wildlife, and I question why not Mercer, to include stronger ordinances, clear prohibitions on habitat destruction, explicit protections for endangered species who require development be consistent with long-term environmental health. This lack of protection is not by accident. In research, coincidentally or not, 2025 elected officials passed Senate Bill 89 reducing water protections by limiting safeguards only to navigable waters. That removed protections from many streams and groundwater sources that Kentuckians and wildlife depend on. I need not define what navigable water is. So thankfully now, in February 2026, House Bill 552 was introduced to repeal Senate Bill 89 and restore the definition of waters for the Commonwealth to include all rivers and streams, creeks, and so forth.
Your time is up.
Okay. If I may finish with one point real quick, I would like.
That's all there is. Diane Floyd, you're up next.
Okay.
Linda Vinson and John Hall.
My name is Dr. Diane Floyd. I live at 3800 Bondville Road in Salvisa. Responsible economic development must not come at the expense of the people, industries, businesses, and of wildlife already here. Planning and zoning is governed by KRS 100.203, requiring that regulations promote public health, safety, and general welfare. That obligation applies to the entire community, not just to one developer, select landowners, a couple politicians, or Kentucky Utilities. It includes protecting existing land uses like agriculture, horse farms, tourism, and the families who have built their lives here. Public trust depends on the confidence that decisions are being made in the best interests of the community, not influenced by personal, financial, or political interests. Under KRS 45A340, public officials thusly influenced may not participate in decisions where they are called upon to act or vote. Any contract in violation is void. This is a legal requirement. Any financial interest, personal benefit, or relationship that could influence decision-making requires recusal from the decision-making process. That is accountability. The public deserves full transparency, disclosure of conflict, and recusal where appropriate. You need to disclose who signed those 4 NDAs and when they were signed. Consider all individuals holding public office in Mercer County notified. Nearly every major safeguard in this ordinance proposal is optional, undefined, or unenforceable. It relies on developer-provided studies, future undefined agreements, and discretionary enforcement. This ordinance does not reflect the historical, geographical, or infrastructure realities of Mercer County. We request a moratorium on all data center projects until the research has been done, infrastructure is in place, harm is prevented, impact studies completed, and the voting public has a shift in perception. This plan documents impacts as though it knows inherently that it violates KRS 100.213, but it does not prevent harm. It allows mitigation, but it does not require compatibility. Most importantly, it allows harm to be evaluated after approval rather than prevented before it. Our comprehensive plan is clear about what we should be protecting. Legally, zoning regulations must align with that plan. The ordinance creates an exception through special zoning rules. If this project were truly aligned, it wouldn't require this many workarounds, exceptions, zoning changes, and future agreements to make it fit, and leaves taxpayers on the hook for those upgrades. This project proceeds without addressing those impacts. It does not just create risk, it creates legal exposure, once again, putting taxpayers on the hook. This is not just about a data center. It is about whether one use can be prioritized in a way that harms many others, and whether this commission allows that to happen. The question is not whether this project can be made to work on paper. The question is whether it works for the people and businesses already here. Kentucky law gives you the authority to prevent that harm. Legal principles require you to prevent that harm. And the people sitting here today are asking you to use that authority to make sure that that harm is looked at before you pass these ordinances instead of trying to fix them after. We continue to request a moratorium.
I thought Heather Henson was next, but
You are, but
okay, all right,
Pearson,
cool.
yeah.
Okay.
You're on deck.
Okay, and I've passed out already my statement. My name is Heather Henson. I live at 1395 North Buster Pike, Harrodsburg, Kentucky. When we talk about the proposed data center, we have to start with one simple question. Where is the power coming from, and who is really paying for it? Data centers don't operate like typical businesses. They require enormous amounts of electricity, often comparable to tens of thousands of homes, a small city. The kind of demand places real strain on the regional grid, especially in rural areas like ours that were never designed to support industrial scale energy consumption. And when that strain happens, infrastructure has to be upgraded. New transmission lines, substations, generation capacity. And this is where the proposed ordinance falls short. There are no enforceable limits on energy demand, no requirements tying approval to verified grid capacity, and no clear standards for how much infrastructure expansion is acceptable before it begins impacting the public. So the next question becomes, who pays for those upgrades? Under Kentucky law, utilities are allowed to recover their costs. That means if infrastructure is expanded to support a private data center, those costs can be passed along to the ratepayers, to us, not to the billion-dollar corporation. And again, the ordinance is silent on this. There are no protections for ratepayers. Kentucky utilities are regulated, yes, but they are also allowed to petition for rate increases tied to infrastructure investments. If this project moves forward, there needs to be absolute transparency about what has been promised and how those costs will be distributed. Because once those costs are approved, they don't go away. They show up on every bill, every month, for years. Now, speaking of power, another concern is this: backup generators. These facilities rely heavily on diesel generators. When the grid fails, or even during routine testing, those generators run. That means emissions, noise, impacts on air quality, things that affect us all. And once again, that's where the ordinance falls short. There are no clearly defined limits on generator use, no detailed emission standards beyond general compliance, and that's not acceptable. Total transparency and accountability is what we are requesting. We need independent third-party environmental impact studies, publicly available real-time monitoring of energy use and emissions, clear documentations of infrastructure costs and who is responsible for them. The current ordinance does not require any of these things. It does not guarantee transparency before approval, which is what we are requesting. Because once this kind of development is approved, it's incredibly difficult to reverse. And the risk doesn't sit with the developer. It sits with the community. It sits with us. Mercer County residents should not be asked to carry long-term costs for short-term gains. We continue to request a moratorium. Thank you very much.
Mary Dilemma, you're on deck.
Hi, my name is Crimson Mongie, 260 Mallard Cove, and I'm here to strongly oppose the proposed data center development adjacent to my home and my neighborhood. My position is not based upon a lot of doctoral facts. It's an advocate for my daughter. My opposition is based on the serious and disproportionate impact that this project would have on vulnerable residents like my child. Yeah, it's okay. This is Kendall Grace, and she lives with a very severe neurological disorder. Her brain is only 50% formed and functions. She has 7 brain tumors. She has 4 different types of epileptic seizures, and she has had over 100,000 micro-mini strokes so far, and we do not need more. Her condition requires a stable, quiet, and low stimulation environment in order to protect her and remain safe and healthy. I chose our home very intentionally because the area provides exactly what she needs to survive. Quiet spaces, open spaces, and a calm rural setting that supports her daily function and well-being. A data center operating next to our home would fundamentally change her environment. These facilities generate constant noise, increased lighting, ongoing vehicle traffic, and not to mention ongoing construction. While this may be manageable for some, for my daughter, it isn't just an inconvenience, it's a massive health risk. Increased sensory stimulation and environmental disruption can directly contribute to her amount of stress, uncontrollable seizure activity, and to be blunt, ultimately can cause her to die. This concern is not limited to just my family. In our neighborhood, we have several children and adults who are neurodivergent and have special needs. Many families here specifically move here because of the environment. It's quiet, low-density setting that allows our loved ones to feel safe and regulated. That environment is not incidental, and it is essential for her quality of life. This decision is not simply based about land preference. It's about an equitable consideration of health and disability impacts. Development decisions must account for how projects affect all residents, including those who depend on specific environmental conditions to maintain a healthy quality of life. A large-scale industrial data center is not compatible with a town like ours. There are far more appropriate locations for such a facility in the area already designated for industrial use and designed to accommodate this level of impact. And respectfully, Mercer County is not one of them. I respectfully urge you to deny this proposal and protect the health, safety, and dignity of those residents who rely on this community as a stable and supportive place to live. I hope you all take the time to make an ethical decision. Thank you.
Could you spell your name, please?
Crimson Monju. You need to spell it?
Please.
Okay. Crimson, first name. Last name is Mongeau, 260 Mallard Cove.
Thank you.
Mary DeLima, 165 Buena Vista Estates, Harrodsburg. Good evening. In 2004, I found myself in an uneasy position, recently divorced with a 40-acre farm, big house, and very little income. I told my daughter, instead of teaching horseback riding lessons and training horses for others, I would do it right here in Mercer County. Even though she was only 8 years old, she believed in me, and so did the people of Mercer County and the surrounding counties. I am forever grateful for the help that I received from my friends and neighbors. Today I have a good business, boarding, teaching, and training horses. forces that are competing all over the United States and even in Europe. Putting a data center on some of the best land in Mercer County is an injustice to all. A single data center uses 5 million gallons of fresh water a day, and the need for more water increases over time. Microsoft's water consumption increased by 34% between 2021 and 22. Google's water consumption increased by nearly 22% over the same period. After it is used, the water for cooling a data center is not suitable for human consumption or agricultural use. This means that not only are data centers consuming large quantities of drinking water, but they are effectively removing that water from our cycle. We are already in a state of drought. According to the Environmental Energy Study Institute, our streams, creeks, and aquifers, as well as the Kentucky River, will all be poisoned with dangerous amounts of PFAS, commonly known as forever chemicals, as a result of data centers. These chemicals will be in our soil, air, drinking water, our food chain. Over time, this will impact the health of our community. Toxins will accumulate in the liver, blood, kidneys, increasing the likelihood of high cancer rates. Researchers have also found that forever chemicals impact fetal health, growth, organ development, and reproductive health. In 2024, in Cumberland and Bladen counties in North Carolina, 7,000 drinking wells had to be shut down because of Chemours, the largest producer of PFAS materials for data centers. Studies have shown that the contaminated area stretched for 12 miles from the plant. My livelihood, my business will disappear from this landscape because of the poisonous water and soil. This ordinance does not have the water quality monitoring protections we need. The data center should be responsible for testing the chemicals in the water, and that information should be publicly available. They need to be responsible for releasing the information on how much water they are using and how often. We, the people of Mercer County, have a right to clean water. We should not be at increased risks of cancers and have our land destroyed so the massive tech companies can get richer. We continue to request a moratorium on any data center.
We're going to take about a 10-minute break. And when we come back, Laura Duham from Hill will be here.
Duhamel.
Okay. So, about 10 minutes. We'll be back at 6:12.
guys for having me. You're doing great.
We're going to go ahead and get started back. Laura? State your name and address.
Yes,
please.
Laura Duhamel, 701 Handy Pike, Harrodsburg, Kentucky. I've reviewed the draft ordinance, and while some areas are very strong, I offer the following questions that should be considered and are a concern of many here this evening. The first is, who retains the rights to our local water? Is it the business end user, or let's say data center in this example, or our community? We are currently in a drought in spring, which is historically and in recent memory considered our wet season. Are our farmers not going to be allowed to irrigate their livestock in their fields? I mean, what happens when the pressure is on our system in a drought? Who gets first priority? Will the city of Harrodsburg and county be required to limit our consumption to feed the data center? No outdoor watering or pools? Please understand the ordinance is being put forward to us with no WSA for review, and I know you're working on one, but that should come first, again, before the rest of this. The reason rural communities are considered attractive to data centers, it's the amount of farmland and the lack of strain right now on our water systems. This is very attractive with them, coupled with the fact that many rural communities are considered soft business targets, and we need to understand that for what we're saying. They consider us small, they consider us naive. We don't fight in the big business world every day, and they have an advantage over us in that regard. On my address on Handy Pike, we don't draw from Lake Village. We're really the tail end of the North Mercer water line. There are days when the water pressure is so low when I turn on the faucet, it's seconds before water comes through. That should be a known issue that we think about in advance to the rest of this. I am opening a cut flower and vegetable farm stand as I go into retirement at the end of the year. Will I be able to water my crop? I mean, is that going to be viable to me, or is that lost to me when right now we do have abundant water? Regarding the food chain, Kentucky is touted as the largest beef producer east of the Mississippi, and now Mercer is not the largest county producing beef in our state, but we do have many farmers here that do produce livestock. If they don't have hay, if they can't water their livestock, if they cannot irrigate their fields, the few farms that are left will have very few precious resources left to them. Currently, our farmers are able to diversify. They can do forage, lands, livestock, consumer projects. And at one point, I believe several years ago, when Texas had that awful drought, we had farmers here in Mercer County shipping 18-wheelers full of hay down to Texas. And I think there's some farmers here you can ask about, they were part of that plan. We have long relied on our historic identification to produce local revenue, historic identification to produce local revenue for our businesses. We have Shaker Village, which is one of our most absolute treasured resources. It's a national tourist destination. From this one venue alone, our economy prospers. This does not include the horse industry with incredible resources for all horse lovers. The ability to bring your family.
Thank you very much, Nathan Sakito. William Marshall, moving on ahead.
I'm Nathan Salcedo, and I live at 558 Aspinhall Drive, Harrodsburg, Kentucky, 40330. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Nathan Salcedo, and I serve on the board of the James Herod Trust and the statewide Heritage Council appointed by the governor. and also the Harrodsburg Historical Society and Chair of Preservation under the Heritage Council. I am additionally a resident of Mercer County who owns a historic home. I do not share this for recognition, but to make clear, my perspective tonight is grounded in the deep ongoing commitment to protect the history and cultural resources of this community. I come before you today with serious concerns about the proposed development of a data center in this area. The land consideration is not just open ground. It's historically significant terrain that tells the story of Mercer County in many ways, the story of Kentucky itself. The region has been recognized for its agricultural richness and has served as vital landscape for early settlements, farming, and community developments. Generations of families, names like Yoakum, Shaker communities, Moores, Holmans, and Davises, have depended on and valued this land for the productivity and a place in our shared history. And importantly, that history is still visible today. Surrounding the area are historical significant properties that continue to identify in this community, such as the Smith-Williams House Woodlawn, reflects early land grants and evolution of agriculture in Mercer County. Viney Grove traces back to the late 18th century and provides some of the earliest documented settlements in the region. Glenworth stands as an extraordinary example of 19th century architecture and craftsmanship with its Flemish bond bricks and classic details. Linwood and the John Bowman House further illustrate the architectural and cultural legacy that has been preserved here for generations. These are not isolated landmarks, as they are part of a broader historic landscape, one that includes farmland, view sheds, and current rural character that gives this place meaning. That context matters because historic preservation is not just about protecting structures, it's about protecting the environment around them. The setting, the open land, and the continuity of place, those are just as important as the buildings themselves. Data center, by its nature, brings a fundamentally different kind of impact. It introduces industrial scale development, significant infrastructure demands, visual disruption, and long-term changes to the landscape that cannot be reversed. Once the transformation occurs, the historic integrity of this area will be permanently altered. There are more appropriate locations for this type of project already suited for industrial use. There are impacts on historical and cultural resources would not severely impact as much as it would here in this area as the proposed site. This area is not one of these places. We have the responsibility to balance progress with preservation to ensure that economic development does not come at the cost of losing the very character that makes Mercer County unique. For that reason, I respectfully request a moratorium on all data center development in Mercer County until thorough evaluation can be conducted on the impact of historical resources, agriculture, land, community character. This pause is not about stopping progress, it's about making sure that we get it right. Once we lose the landscape, we will not get it back. I urge you to consider not just immediate benefits, but long-term consequences of the decision. Thank you.
William Marshall. Go back to Ronald.
Thank you. My name is William Marshall of 505 McAfee Lane in Salvisa. My background is over 30 years experience in the field of civil engineering and construction regulations. My comments will be focused on the issue of stormwater and decommissioning. On page 3 of the proposed ordinance, it states that the approved site plans be submitted to the office of the Mercer County Clerk. The question is, approved by whom? Apparently, this ordinance refers to the Harrodsburg-Mercer County subdivision regulations that relies on the civil engineer hired by the developer to design a stormwater management system is the entire approval process. Relying on a civil engineer employed by the developer as a method of approval is clearly a conflict of interest. Any civil engineer hired by the developer will be tasked to design a site plan that is based on the bottom line cost of the developer, not necessarily the most effective. A proper review from an objective civil engineer is an absolute necessity for a project of this magnitude. To my knowledge, there is no civil engineer on staff familiar with project coordination and construction regulation experience, especially for heavy industrial technology sites employed by the Mercer County government that is qualified to undertake this task. The ordinance needs to identify an independent entity that is tasked with the review and approval process not associated with the developer and provide their contact information. The ordinance also needs to indicate which standards and specifications are applicable. Also, the proposed ordinance fails to mention that a permit is required by the State of Kentucky Division of Water, their specific requirements and contact information. Perhaps the state can provide the necessary peer review needed. Since data centers will result in hundreds of acres of impervious area that will lead to a significant increase in stormwater runoff, depending on the rain event, a sequence of construction should be included in the application, with a storm drain system being constructed and fully functional as part of the first phase prior to any construction to protect the surrounding community. Additionally, the karst study should be incorporated into the proposed plans to clearly show that structures and stormwater drainage will not lead to any degradation of the karst system. We don't want to repeat what occurred with the Corvette Museum. Finally, as you know, technology changes rapidly. It's not inconceivable that in the near future, data centers will be rendered obsolete. As a result, any permit issued should be a conditional use permit and a plan put into place to decommission the operation and restore the property. The decommission plan should include identification of all structures, equipment, and facilities that have no ongoing purpose shall be removed. Hazardous materials, including batteries, fuel, or refrigerants, shall be appropriately disposed of in compliance with all local and state and federal regulations. Disturbed soils shall be stabilized and revegetated. Any utility connection shall be safely disconnected and capped. The site shall be restored to a condition compatible with surrounding land uses or consistent with the most restrictive adjacent zoning district. In closing, the purpose of a construction ordinance is to provide guidance to the applicant through the permit process while protecting the general public. This ordinance lacks the specifics necessary to achieve both goals. The reality is developers and contractors can make mistakes that can be corrected. A mistake at this stage in the process can have serious consequences. Careful thought and guidance needs to be applied by professionals with a background in constructing data center projects or any large-scale industrial complexes. As a result, I am urging this board and the fiscal court to enact a moratorium until such time an adequate ordinance for heavy industrial technology sites can be satisfactorily completed. Thank you.
Caitlin Cooper, you'll be next.
In the Mercer County Planning and Zoning Comprehensive Plan, in the land use section under land use number 9, page 19, the plan states, encourage the preservation of prime farmlands and or agricultural land with high productivity capabilities from encroachment of residential, commercial, industrial, and other types of uses in order to protect the county's agricultural economic base and productivity potential. I agree with this statement. And I thank Planning and Zoning for putting it in our comprehensive plan. What is surprising is the lack of any mention of protecting this prime farmlands in Mercer County with this Planning and Zoning proposed data center ordinance. Is this an oversight or an intentional act by the ad hoc committee charged with drawing up this proposed ordinance? This is healthy farmland topsoil taken from my family farm, located right across the road from the AFI farm that is proposing turning their farm into a hyper data center location. If topsoil is heavy, it will have a dark brown appearance, will be teeming with microorganism life, and will be prime location for plant life to grow in. When a plant grows out of this topsoil, a healthy life cycle exists. The plant will take in CO2 and sunlight to feed itself, sequester the carbon from the CO2 in the ground it is growing in, and release oxygen into the air for us humans and our other animals to breathe. This is what is happening at the AFI farm at the present time. The farm's covered with winter wheat planted last fall. Other attributes of healthy soil with living vegetation are it stores water instead of letting it run off. It's looser and easier for nutrients and water to stay and move through. And it keeps the immediate environment cooler instead of bouncing heat off it and raising the area temperature. How long does it take Mother Earth to create 1 inch of topsoil? It depends on the climate, but somewhere between 100 to 900 years. How many inches of prime topsoil are on a Mercer County prime farmland farm? 6 to 12 inches of topsoil. Because of the length of time it takes to create topsoil, it is considered a non-renewable resource on the human timescale. If this proposed data center ordinance is passed as is, then it will contradict land use number 9, page 19 of the comprehensive plan. It does not prevent prime farmland from being used for their site. Then we lose a non-renewable finite resource that we depend on for our food and the air that we breathe. We ask the Mercer County Planning and Zoning Board to correct this oversight and declare prime farmland ineligible to locate a data center on, and declare a moratorium on the data center applications for the next 6 months. Until more study can be done, and with the assistance of non-biased professional experts that are more qualified to advise you on the consequence of locating a data center in our county. The title of your board is Planning and Zoning. This request is vital planning, part of planning and zoning. Thank you. Jim Bo Baxter, 467 Beaumont Avenue, Harrodsburg, Kentucky.
Thank you. Caitlin Cooper and Chris Walker, you'll be on deck.
Good evening. I'm Caitlin Cooper, and I live at 685 Handy Road in Harrodsburg. I spoke to you all at our last meeting, and I quite honestly had no intention of speaking here tonight because I don't feel the need to repeat myself. But until recently, my opposition has been based on research, what I've read, and what I've learned. But last week, on a trip with 17 head of horses to Columbus, Ohio, for a show, I saw a mega data center in person. And I'll be honest, it made me sick to my stomach. These are not small, quiet buildings tucked away out of sight. They are massive, industrial, imposing structures that dominate the landscape. They look like the Los Angeles airport. While we were there, we spoke with a woman who lives near an operating data center. She told us plainly, keep fighting. She said living next to it is unbearable. The noise, the lights, all night long. She also shared that the promises made to her community did not materialize. The facility employs very few people, many of whom work remotely, so there are no real local jobs to speak of. They were told to expect significant tax revenue, but instead, the county has faced new costs from infrastructure demands. And perhaps most troubling, she said she would have loved to move, but she cannot give her home away. Her property value has been that devastated. Now imagine that kind of facility here in Mercer County. Imagine it rising out of prime farmland or other open fields. Imagine it placed near Shaker Village, a place known for its beauty, its history, and its animals. Imagine it near Harrington Lake, where people come from for peace, recreation, and the natural scenery that makes this area special. Imagine it next to that sweet little girl that was up here. It would be like landing an airport in her front yard. We are not just talking about one property or one business. We are talking about the character of an entire region, one that draws visitors, supports agriculture, and preserves a sense of history and place that cannot be recreated once it's lost. The area is a treasure, and treasures once compromised are rarely restored. I urge you to think long and hard before adopting this ordinance without improvements or approving rezoning that opens the door to heavy industrial development in the heart of Mercer County. The document before you does not go far enough to protect what makes Mercer County unique. Adopt a moratorium to take the time to further study these data centers. Please protect our farmland, protect our tourism, protect our agriculture, protect our heritage, protect our kids and animals. Protect Mercer County. We are Mercer County, and we request a moratorium.
Julie Six will be next.
Good evening. My name is Chris Walker. I live at 502 Tomahawk Drive, Harrisburg, Kentucky. Tonight, I want to focus on one thing specifically, a few shortfalls that I've seen in your ordinance. My background comes from political consulting and working with local municipalities in this very topic. First, I want to state it weakens your role in the project-by-project oversight. By making hyperscale data centers a permitted use in the IT zone, the ordinance removes the need for the conditional use permit. That means once zoning is approved, the ability to shape or deny a specific project is significantly reduced. For a use that exceeds 100 megawatts of power, spans a minimum of 300 acres, and fundamentally changes the character of an area, that's not a gap. That's a governance failure. Second, the governance outsources critical decision-making to the applicant. It requires environmental impact assessments, noise studies, floodplain analysis, but every one of those is prepared by professionals hired by the developer. That puts us in a position not of just reviewing the information, but it takes away your ability to control or preside over the situation. There's no requirement for independent peer review, no county selected consultant, or no verification mechanism. You're being asked to trust, not verify. I'm going to skip over point 3 because that's just the same thing that you've heard over and over tonight. But next is enforcement is too weak. Rather than putting you in a proactive position, it's put you in a weak reactive situation. The ordinance sets forth a number of limits and standards, but if those limits are exceeded, there's language that the operator must undertake efforts to mitigate, or only the county can then pursue legal action. There's no automatic penalty, no escalating fine structure, no immediate consequence that the same applies to the environmental reporting. Reports are required, but there's no defined trigger or enforcement in these reports if they show harm. That leaves the planning and zoning without real enforcement authorities unless it undergoes some lengthy legal process. Lastly, the ordinance allows large-scale industrial development up to 1,500 acres in total, while concentrating decision-making upfront in the rezoning stage and limiting ongoing oversight afterwards. That structure reduces your role over time, and with that being said, long-term oversight is what's required for projects like this. You shouldn't be putting all your effort in the beginning, but you should also focus on what happens next. Many people ask, what happens next? And in this ordinance, you do not address that. In closing, this is not about stopping development. It's about making sure we retain the authority and the tools and the structure needed to manage responsibly. Right now, this ordinance asks you to approve first, trust later, and enforce when or if you can. That's not strong governance, and until those gaps are addressed with clear, enforceable standards, we continue to request a moratorium. Thank you.
Julie 6, 515 Playlick Road, Salvisa. I know tonight you will hear a lot of concerns about water, pollution, and of this not being part of the established comprehensive plan. But this is also about our lake, our tourism, and the livelihoods tied to them, including my own. Lake properties and short-term rentals are not just side businesses. They're a big piece of our local economy and tourism tax infrastructure. Families come here to swim, boat, fish, and relax. They seek the experience of being somewhere outside of the hustle and bustle. As talks about a data center have surfaced, the experiences our tourists hope for is indeed threatened, not just by an obnoxious humming sound, but a contamination risk. One of the biggest threats to Harrington Lake today is harmful algae blooms. They can produce toxins that make the water unsafe for swimming, harmful for pets, and risky for human health. When algae blooms appear, tourists cancel. That happened last year to us.
Bookings also drop, and small business owners take a hit. Data centers require massive infrastructure, leading to the inevitable runoff. That runoff carries high levels of nitrates and other nutrients that feed harmful algae blooms. We are an agriculture community that already experiences heightened nitrate loads. Imagine adding more than we currently have and the implications of doing so. This isn't hypothetical. In fact, it happened in Oregon this year. Although Amazon refused to admit guilt, are we really surprised? They instead decided to throw $20.5 million at the problem to assist in cleanup. The issue is that once the damage is done, it takes years to bring the watershed back to safety, resulting in a lot of financial loss to those involved in tourism. Just ask KU about cleaning up their coal ash contamination at the lake nearly a decade ago. We are just now getting back on track. There isn't a quick fix. I also want to make it very clear that the choices of our planning and zoning and fiscal court will not only impact their own constituents, but also other counties who have the rights and responsibilities to legally protect their own communities. Do you truly wish to be responsible for contamination that could reach Boyle and Garrett counties? And how about those all along the Dix River? There are still several counties with residents along the lake with wells and no access to public water. Our lake house is one of those. If we allow development that increases the nutrient runoff into our watershed, we are effectively undermining the very asset that drives our local economy and that won't dwindle and become obsolete within a few years like a data center. Once harmful algae blooms become a regular occurrence, the damage won't just be environmental, it will be economic and create a negative reputation for our community. I respectfully request a moratorium to allow time for thorough understanding of the impacts of data centers and appropriate ordinances for them. Decisions should not rely on the narratives of those who seek to financially benefit or reps whose interests are tied up to promoting data centers, especially in areas they have zero connection to or concern for. You, on the other hand, have a responsibility to fully understand before implementing something that has the potential to have lasting consequences on each and every one of us, your constituents and your neighbors. Thank
you. HE something. I can't believe it. Break it out. 945 Phillips Lane.
I'm a doctor, I have bad handwriting. I'm a doctor with bad handwriting. Okay. My name is Dr. Lee Dallaire. I live at 945 Phillips Lane in Harrodsburg, Kentucky. I've lived at this address with my family since 2009. I'm a medical doctor, certified in family medicine and addiction medicine, and I have a master's degree in pharmacology and toxicology. Our farm adjoins the northwest corner of the preserve at Shaker Village, where I serve as a trustee on the board of directors. Our farm, which contains 1/3 of a mile of frontage on Shawnee Run Creek, was placed into a conservation easement in 2019 to protect and preserve the farmland and forest in perpetuity. This land is forever protected from further development and will remain pasture for livestock and habitat for the abundance of wildlife we have in this area, to include but not limited to deer, bobcat, turkey, quail, woodcock, skunks, endangered species of bats, and recently I viewed 2 bald eagles soaring above the farm. Mercer County contains significant regions of precious prime farmland and sensitive ecological areas and habitats in numerous species that we need to preserve and protect. Mercer County also features significant karst terrain characterized by limestone, bedrock, sinkholes, and underground streams that make groundwater highly vulnerable to contamination. The Kentucky River is interconnected to these water sources and provides drinking water to Mercer, Mercer and numerous other communities in Kentucky. The region of Mercer County, which includes Shaker Village, the Palisades region, the area proposed for the data center, they're all denoted by James C. Kearns on the Kentucky Geological Survey map as intense karst areas with the highest ranking, thus the most vulnerable to contamination and pollution with toxic chemicals and heavy metals. Building an AI data center in this area serves to put everyone in the community at risk of being exposed to neurotoxic chemicals, carcinogens, and heavy metals in our water. This goes back to my toxicology background. This is a big deal. Data centers can cause water contamination through massive chemically treated water usage for cooling and potential wastewater leakage. These facilities may discharge wastewater containing biocides and heavy metals such as zinc and copper. Cooling systems often discharge wastewater with elevated total dissolved solids, chlorides, and chemicals like ethylene glycol. Corrosion
inhibitors, and anti-scaling agents, phosphates and nitrites, which are carcinogens, are introduced into the water stream to protect the machinery, which can then enter the local water supply. Potential for this. Data centers often have large underground diesel storage tanks, backup generators, which pose a risk for leakage of the fuel into the groundwater. The intent of my testimony is to relay my significant safety concerns related to these issues and posed by the construction, safety concerns related to the proposed data center in regards to water issues that could have tremendously negative and potentially toxic effects upon the water in Mercer County and all the local communities that utilize the water from the Kentucky River, as well as livestock and wildlife that drink from these natural water sources. I request the members of Planning and Zoning to please address these safety and toxicology issues posed by the construction and utilization of the data center before allowing any zoning changes, contracts, or permits to be considered. I respectfully request a moratorium to allow this process to occur. I thank each and every one of you for your service and time. I know this is a really tough job, and we appreciate your work and hope that you'll serve to protect and preserve the integrity of the Mercer County community and landscape for our current residents and the future generations.
Ed Meter, I live at 595 Moore Lane, Harrisburg. This technology is changing fast. Imagine building an industrial complex that will destroy the ecological and environmental natural resources as well as damage residents' health in an area only to have it sitting empty because the technology has become obsolete. Who is going to pay to tear down these industrial buildings once newer, smaller technologies replace these massive, cumbersome, environmentally unfriendly buildings? Taxpayers? Just like we will be billed for infrastructure upgrades we don't need. Why wouldn't the county want to protect its residents by holding the owners responsible for their buildings and expensive cleanup of toxic equipment and materials used? For this purpose, a decommissioning bond requirement should be written into the data center ordinance to provide financial assurance that the developer will cover the full cost of site cleanup, infrastructure removal, and environmental remediation if the facility is abandoned. Data centers are not generally required by federal law to post decommissioned bonds, but they are increasingly mandated to do so by local governments, municipalities, counties, to cover the cost of removing infrastructure and environmental remediation if the site is abandoned. These bonds, which protect the community from, for example, stranded assets, are growing in demand as infrastructure becomes more complex. A performance bond should also be included in the ordinance, which will cover any damage to existing infrastructure and surrounding properties during construction. Kentucky Legislator 26 RS SB 319, as of April 7, 2026, related to data centers on agricultural land, has not been approved and is currently in the Committee on Committees, introduced on March 2nd, 2026. The bill aims to require decommissioning plans and surety bonds for certain data centers. Lawmakers are not scheduled to reconvene for regular business until January 5, 2027, unless called until special extraordinary session by the governor. We continue to request a moratorium.
Good evening. I might take this out. Hey, maybe this will be better. Good evening. My name is Keone Geist. I live at 360 Shawnee Run Road. That is 2.5 miles from the entrance of the KU power plant. I want to speak to you about the letter before you that is from the Kentucky Agricultural Commissioner, Jonathan Shell. When I read this letter, it said what most of us in this gymnasium are already thinking. I stand behind what he's saying because this is how I feel about the land, the farms, and the families, and the kind of community that we're trying to protect here in Mercer County. At the same time, what Commissioner Shell says isn't just my opinion. It's real. It's real to all of us. It's the loss of productive farmland, the strain of our roads and infrastructure, and long-term changes that we can't undo. If I could direct you to paragraph 2. Prime farmland is one of our county's most valuable and irreplaceable resources. Once it is converted for commercial or industrial use, it is effectively gone forever. This type of land is uniquely suited for food production and supports local farmers, agribusiness, and rural economies. Protecting it is essential not only for preserving our heritage, but for ensuring long-term food security and economic resilience for the Commonwealth. This isn't just about one single project. It's about the direction that Mercer County is going. And what are we willing to give up? To end with a quote from Commissioner Shell, "The decisions that you make today will shape your county and our Commonwealth for generations. Once the farmland is gone, it cannot be replaced. I urge you to act with caution, stewardship, and a commitment to preserving the resources that define our community." I ask that this letter and my testimony be entered into the record and taken into consideration as you move forward. We are Mercer County, and we want a moratorium.
Hello, my name is Jordan Sharkey, and I'm a resident in Mercer County at 260 Edgewood Drive, Harrodsburg. I appreciate the Commission's continued effort to source community feedback of proposed industrial technology, zoning, and ordinances. And as it stands, I think the current ordinance draft addresses many concerns I've heard for potential data centers. I generally support the expansion of infrastructure within Mercer County, including that of IT zoning, but would extend further ordinance considerations as to the monitoring and limiting of noise pollution within IT zoning that may impact proposed locations. As the IT draft currently exists, I respect the Commission's commitment to both noise limitations and studies, but I fear it may not be enough due to its coverage gap of low-frequency noise. The draft proposes measuring noise using A-weighted decibels, a scale designed for easily audible sources, heavily discounting sound below 200 hertz, which is where the hum from data center cooling processes typically live. These frequencies have measured negative effects over prolonged exposure, including an increase in sleep disorders, hearing loss, and cardiovascular diseases. Some models estimate data center noise traveling as far as 2.5 miles from its source, which puts current prospective locations encircling anywhere from a quarter to a half of Harrodsburg, respectively. Traditional attempts at noise dampening solutions, such as walls and barriers currently outlined in the draft, fail at meaningfully disrupting specifically low-range frequencies. My recommendation is to include additional ordinance that covers expert measurement and assessment of C-weighted decibels focused on low-frequency noise in addition to the A-weighted propositions. This should be compliant with ISO 9613 specified equipment as currently outlined in the draft. Counties across the nation are starting to adopt additional C-weighted standards, such as Prince William County in Virginia, which despite having data centers that passed A-weighted limits, spent 3 years undergoing complaints from residents before adopting C-weighted enforcement. Mercer County can avoid loss of time, money, and sanity by learning from the mistakes of others and better locating and managing future potential IT zones. Thank you.
Sir, he will be over there. Katrina Blankenship.
Hello, my name is Katrina Blankenship, 1701 Bellows Mill Road, Harrodsburg, Kentucky. I live and I work in this community, specifically at historic Shakertown. And the proposed data center would be directly between where I live and where I work. The ordinance that you have currently put forth on page 7, number 13, lot requirements and streets, says that they are exempt from certain ordinance and regulations. Why are we not holding them to the same standards that we have already set? I assume they were put there for a reason. For example, interparcel connections are put in place to deter traffic off of main roads. So why are these data centers not required to do that? The roads that will be used, and some of the only strong language in this section, says that it must be accessed by state roads. The state roads in this area would be US 68 and 33, which is also what connects and intersects at the entrance of Shaker Village. Now, these roads are not safe to begin with. In fact, just this last month, there was a crash right at the entrance of Shakertown. Traffic was shut down, an ambulance was called to the scene. I recently heard in an NPR article that Holly Ridge, Louisiana, has seen a 600% increase in accidents on the roads near Meta's new data center in their community. It's also worth noting that Shaker Village welcomes students from around the entire state to Shaker Village on field trips. There are a lot of school buses traveling down these roads. There's also the road conditions themselves. These are narrow roads with no shoulders. They are not designed to see this kind of traffic from heavy construction work. And they are in poor condition to begin with. Extensive alligator cracking is already evident, and we will only see it get worse when this work continues. The roads will undoubtedly need improvements. Resurfacing, perhaps widening to include those shoulders, and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet has allotted less than $1 million for 68. Is that enough money to cover these costs? Because if it's not, then that cost will be on our shoulders. Mercer County residents will have to pay that with tax revenue. In conclusion, even though I work at a historic site, I am not an enemy of progress. The Shakers themselves adopted the newest and best technologies of their day. But they did it to improve their community, not to allow others to come in and make a profit off of them. These roads are not built for this. So please, stop, consider the consequences here. We ask for a moratorium. Thank you.
Will be asked for help.
Sarah Hill, 1816 Benarsville Road. My name is Sarah Hill, and my fiance and I reside in Harrodsburg, where we farm on 2 different properties. I will not stand here tonight and pretend to have all the facts, but what I do have is a heart and love for this community. As a resident, a business owner, and a farming family, I wholeheartedly am against the data center. I'd like to start out by saying how much I respect each person on this board and fiscal court. As someone who has served on boards and committees, I know how difficult it can be. My first question is if there's a long-term plan in place regarding farmland and zoning in Mercer County. Over the past few years, we have seen numerous farms rezoned from ag to residential, commercial, and now potentially IT for development, to which seems like a handful of the same people under different LLCs. This has continued to be my concern as to when is enough enough. Is there a plan in place to protect our rural area, or we will continue to let the same few people profit off of pop-up subdivisions or worse, a data center? I hear it over and over again. Well, if you want to stay at farmland, then you buy it. That might be possible if we haven't already rezoned so much that now our farmland is being priced at commercial, residential, and potentially IT prices. Compare the price of land here to just a few counties over. The difference is insane. It's made it nearly impossible for the normal farmer who's not backed by AFI or any other investment company to afford it and actually farm it, let alone make a living. I'm also curious if there's anything in place preventing so much conflict of interest. In a small town, I understand that most of everyone is connected in some way. However, when does that cross a line? When you have developers related to officers, board members who potentially gain business from development, fiscal court members that are relatives intertwined with developers and tourist commission members, it raises concerns. I am no way accusing of any wrongdoing. I'm simply asking, when does the line become blurry, and when does voting yes become more about personal and relationship gain rather than the betterment of our community? We can slap the name of growth on anything and make it seem like a good idea, but what does that mean long-term for Mercer County? Why would we trust the words of people that only stand to make money off this? Life-changing money. Do I blame them? Not at all. But when it affects your neighbors and everyone else in the county, then it becomes more of doing what you want with the land you own. And that's why these meetings like this exist. The only pros and so-called talks of bettering our county financially come from higher-up millionaires eager to make more. Why would we believe them? They don't care about us, our small town, our kids, our health. If they don't follow through, what are we going to do? We are looking up to 5,000 acres or more gone forever. Neighbors, friends, farms directly impacted in the worst way imaginable. Please make your recommendation from the voices that matter most, not those making a profit. And moving forward, think about preserving what we do have left so our kids can experience Mercer County as we know it. On an episode of Shark Tank, a man was selling a product specifically for farmers. When the CEO in the room asked him why his product was priced so low and why he didn't mark it up 2, 3, or 4 times more than that, the man replied, "Why would I do that? I try to do the right thing. Farmers are the backbone of America. Look around you tonight. This is Mercer County. Save our farms, our future, and please say no to a data center, or at least request a moratorium." Thank you.
Katrina Sexton will be editor.
Karen Hughes, 365 Phillips Lane. In reading this, I was pleased to see that there was an environmental impact study included as a requirement in an IT zone. However, we request the following improvements. Number 1, the environmental impact assessment, or the EIA, should be part of the requirements falling under a conditional use permit. Number 2, the ordinance states the assessment shall be prepared by a third-party professional engineer, ecologist, environmental planner, or qualified individual. For the size and scale of a data center, only a third-party environmental engineer that is suitable to the commission should be considered. With the current wording, any type of engineer could perform an environmental study. Number 3, the third item listed in the EIA states the potential for public nuisance to the residents resulting from operations in truck traffic included, but not limited to noise, glare, light, and visual objects. In this statement, we would also like included heat islands and low-frequency noise to the residents as well as the wildlife. Number 4, the ordinance states that where the proposed use conflicts with any part of the comprehensive plan, the assessment shall identify mitigation measures that may be undertaken to offset degradation, depletion of the natural resources. In page 8 of our comprehensive plan, It states, as a first objective to the environment, and I quote, to identify and protect sensitive natural resource sites in unique areas from the effects of incompatible development and provide special consideration to the Palisade areas of the Kentucky and Dix River. So a hyperscale data center is in direct conflict with our comprehensive plan. And where it says measures may be taken, I urge the Planning and Zoning Commission to identify mitigation issues yourself with civil engineer that must be taken and identify who will enforce these measures and what the repercussions are in the form of fees or fines if mitigation measures are not followed. This ordinance is an overwhelming task. It needs careful consideration and study, and I urge Planning and Zoning and the Fiscal Court to enact a moratorium. Mercer County deserves the best IT zone ordinance to protect its citizens, their livelihoods, and their heritage. We continue to ask for a moratorium.
Greg Orr will be up there.
Good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as the public in attendance. I've been in your shoes, so I kind of know what that's like. My name is Dr. Katrina Sexton. I live at 315 North 1st Street, Bergen, Kentucky, which connects to Bailey Pike and Handy Pike in Bergen. I am here tonight because I want to formally voice my opinion to any proposed data center or ordinance that would be permitted in Mercer County. My primary concern is the significant degradation of the quality of life for the residents and the environment of Mercer County. There's plenty of statistics, as we've already heard many of those tonight. We need to understand that data centers are not passive neighbors. They operate 24/7, which is not compatible with Mercer County. As a community and as a state, we would not be dealing with this issue if it were not for the poor decisions of others. In an article, the General Assembly came out with a new definition of a qualified data center project, which expands data center projects based on population of Kentucky's counties. This is a vast expansion from previous laws. We can thank our current legislature that has passed this issue onto our local government and you all, the Planning and Zoning Commission, to battle the issue itself. Our current state representative voted in favor of expanding data centers in Kentucky. The legislation at HB 775 removed limitations for large-scale data centers, especially for those who would go into areas of 500,000 or more in the population. They weren't allowed anywhere else. Now with HB 775, they can come to counties as small as Mercer with less than 50,000 residents with a possible investment of $25 million. HB 775, supported by our current state representative, gives incentives to provide sales and use tax exemptions for up to 50 years. My husband's small business, like many other small businesses of people in this room, do not get those tax exemptions. We should not be offering these tax exemptions to data centers when we all pay taxes on our own equipment and our own property. Our state representative voted in favor of this. HB 775 passed in March of 2025, last year, without the governor's signature. It aims to attract massive hyperscale data center developments with massive tax exemptions. A $25 million investment on the front end of a 50-year living, breathing structure is not compensation to the public. The cost will far outweigh the investment. Now, a full year after the gates to Kentucky have been opened to data centers, we see new bills come in like Bill HB 593, 544, and SB 319 a year later, where we see the legislature trying to take steps to correct the recklessness of their decision with HB 775. However, those bills have not been passed. They are only proposed, and they're still waiting for passage. We are not protected. We need you. We need you to take action for us. It is obvious and evident that very little consideration was given to the potential impacts on our populations and our municipalities of smaller communities like Mercer. The decision to pass HB 775 appears to be driven by multi-million-dollar investments. I am all for economic development, responsible economic development. That is not what this was. I do not support irresponsible decisions by those in higher office that leaves it to the local counties and townships to fend for ourselves, which is what they've put on your table, and they put on the rest of the public here. We cannot continue to pass legislation and ordinances that open the doors and the floodgates and then try to slam those doors closed after we've swung them wide open by putting in legislation after the fact to fix the legislation we passed in the first place. We're looking to you to hold the state legislature accountable. We're asking you to put a moratorium in place. We respectfully ask you to make sure the legislature fixes their problem instead of making you fix it for them. In this point, I'll leave you with this. It's not a difficult decision. Take the dollars out of it and put some sense back in it. Thank you.
My name is Greg Orth, and I've lived here at 875 Phillips Lane, Harrodsburg, for 27 years. For the last 20 years, I have pursued an interest in landscape archaeology. And though I am not a professional archaeologist, I believe I am the leading authority on Mercer County's ancient history. My early research was published in 2024 by Springer Nature and was submitted as a citation at your first public meeting. My research has led to the discovery of miles of bison and Native American trails, most leading to the Big Pond, a large lake drained by the Shakers in 1860, and resulted in their discovery of mastodon bones. This is confirmation that ancient megafauna animals traveled to the Big Pond directly from Big Bone Lick State Park, following a trail we now call Highway 127. The first people of the area hunted these animals, and recently one of their kill sites was discovered along a migration trail. This site would be the first of its kind for Kentucky, and all appropriate state agencies were quickly notified, including Planning and Zoning and the Fiscal Court. Plans are underway to soon have the site assessed by state officials, and if warranted, a site number will be issued, allowing for site protection and study. But the draining of the Big Pond caused the community to eventually forget that it ever existed, and that it was the primary reason why Mercer County was home to the first permanent settlement in Kentucky. The rediscovery of the pond and the vast network of related trails has given the community a renewed opportunity to fully understand our unique history. My research also includes studying the land surveys of the first pioneers, as well as their forts, settlements, and stations. Many sites have been lost over time, and locating these sites has been a recent focus of my work and has resulted in finding Simon Kenton Station in Boyle County. Not all of the county's history is lost. Many sites and their buildings are still in existence today and beautifully preserved and documented through the efforts of the James Herod Trust. These sites have not been studied yet for their relationship to the Big Pond and the ancient trail network, which we now know the county is based on. Although I am glad to see the efforts made to minimize damage to the Big Pond district, we must not ignore the other existing sites so important to our past, namely Shaker Village, and the land they now have and once owned in the past, my farm included. The long list of Kentucky's pioneer forefathers, both men and women, deserve to be remembered for their accomplishments, and those accomplishments deserve protection from needless development. The Industrial Technology Zone proposal offered by Planning and Zoning goes a long way to recognize the unique historical legacy we are charged with protecting, yet our unique community has but one chance to avoid an industrial-scale ambush. And if our concerns and requests are many, it comes from our love of and willingness to preserve and protect what we still have left. I again ask for a moratorium. Thank you.
1
behind me. I'm Marion Bauer, and I live at 332 East Lexington Street here in town. We've been in Harrisburg 33 years, having moved from Danville, Kentucky. I'm touching on something that's been alluded to, but it's something I didn't know much about, and I thought I would do my own research, somewhat, anyway. And I thank you for planning and zoning for listening. I'm talking about data center heat desert island effect. Data centers have been studied for more years than I realized, and it's an area that many get taken for granted. I started doing my own research on a specific area of which I had no knowledge and was curious about. When we hear that AI and data centers are heating up, that's a literal statement. A research team led by the Department of Computer Science and Technology at the University of Cambridge, not Kentucky, but Cambridge, using a data set of more than 6,000 data centers worldwide, using a data set of land surface temperatures produced by NASA, found from 2004 to 2024, the surrounding areas of more than 6,000 data centers worldwide saw an average increase of land temperatures at about 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. In some areas, the temperature increased 16.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Thus, we get what is called a heat island effect. And researchers calculated that these heat islands could be felt 6.2 miles away from a data center facilities. That's a radius of 6.2 miles. This study was based on 6,000 data centers worldwide. But as of 2026, there are 11,000 to 12,000 data centers worldwide, with half of them in the United States. The study suggests that data centers can have an environmental as well as an economic impact on the community. That's been brought up by many of those. To quote two Goldman Sachs economists, Manuel Afekasis and Hanjun Wei, who wrote to their clients in February of this year, 2026, the income spending drags will likely be larger for lower income households because electricity accounts for a greater share of their spending. And we've already talked about the effect of what it could have on electricity. I'm sure, what I typed there, okay, I'm sure others have addressed this, but if data centers are literally heating up the surface air around them for 6.3 radial miles, there is cooling that must happen, and that takes a lot of water. And we also know water evaporates. One of the outcomes of the Cambridge study, for which we can all hope comes to fruition, is as quoted: although the impact of data heat islands can be intense, with advances in technology in semiconductor and energy material industries, as well as methodological developments in computer science and electrical engineering, they can be used to mitigate these effects. With that said, I would ask that a moratorium be had to make sure all aspects of any project be carefully considered with ordinance in place and implemented to protect the, and this is quote, planned growth of the county. In addition, land use controls were implemented for the purpose of protecting public health, safety, and general welfare, end quote. This is stated on the P&Z website. So ordinances are key to protect our human and animal population, as well as wildlife, natural resources, farmland, and our historic sites. Thank you.
Dick Bauer. Derek Nagel will be next.
My name's Dick Bauer. I live at 332 East Lexington Street in the city, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I want to talk briefly about something that's already been addressed to various degrees, and that is energy. One of the things that I learned is that the backup generators and UPS systems required to support these data centers is pretty significant, because if they go down, it could cost them up to $7,500 a minute, depending on the size of the place, a minute for every minute they're down in lost revenue and so on. So it's these generators and backup are going to be plentiful. Consumption is staggering. In 2014, there were 58 terawatt hours used, 58, which is 1.4% of the total in the U.S. This is consumed by data centers. In 2023, it was 176, which is 3 times what it was 9 years before. And in 2028, it's estimated to be 350 to 580, which is 5 to 9 times what it was in 2014, a very significant increase. By comparison, if you look at the Brown power plant that we have out here, they produce about 1,500 megawatts of electricity there. They're building a new they're either building or going to build a new gas plant that will produce 645 megawatts of power. That's 45%, not even half of what they're already producing. So where's this extra energy going to come from? And who's going to pay for it? Those are a couple of questions that I have. And one of the things that I noted, it's been addressed also, although I didn't hear it all clearly, the legislators, House Bill 593 was entitled an act relating to data centers, this past legislation. It passed the House 90-8. It went to the Senate. It was never voted on. It got attached to another Senate bill, 197. That bill ultimately got passed. However, the provisions relating to data centers was stripped out of that bill before it was passed. So there is nothing from Frankfurt giving us any help to look at this, to set parameters, to set guardrails about what can we do to rein this in and make sure that we can put up with what we're considering putting in our county. The only other comment I'll make, and I wasn't planning to make this one, but the young lady who spoke a little earlier about Columbus, Ohio, we're from Columbus, Ohio. We moved here from there 42 years ago. All the little towns around Columbus, Ohio, if you want to go up there and drive a 25-mile radius around the downtown of Columbus, Ohio, and go to New Albany, go to Alexandria, go to Hilliard, go to all these little towns around there, there are, according to the AI, 114 data centers in that area. And she's right. You drive around up there, you see massive buildings. I'll end with that. Thank you for your attention. I encourage the moratorium.
Good afternoon, Derek Naylor, 120 Ashbrook Lane, Harrodsburg, Kentucky. I just want to thank everybody for coming out and speaking to the commission today, and I appreciate you hearing our words. Greetings, my name is Derek Naylor. My wife and I moved to Harrodsburg last June. We love this community, and we bring a unique experience to this meeting. We lived in Hilliard, Ohio, home to 5 data centers and more being built. I'd like to briefly cover what it's like to live near a data center and the impact to the tax base. The light pollution from these sites illuminate homes nearby. The massive substations needed to power the sites are an eyesore and often at the front of the complex, facing roadways and residential areas. These sites, consisting of half a dozen buildings, present low-frequency noise which isn't spelled out or protected in the proposed ordinance, or an industrial drone to keep the servers cool. The high-tension overhead power lines require cutbacks and clear cutting, destroying shade vegetation, natural wildlife habitat, and most importantly, prime farmland, which is not protected in the ordinance. If any of these elements are mentioned in the ordinance, there's no teeth to enforce the regulation, rendering it moot. We need a moratorium to ensure provisions are in place to protect our prime farmland and citizens from the danger of these unknown infrastructure impacts and changes. Next, the failure of these companies to support Ohio communities is real. Deals were struck to give 15-year real estate tax abatements. In Kentucky, with the failure of SB 197, we, the citizenry, will not be protected from subsidizing the infrastructure needs for these data centers. While living in Hilliard, we received 4 tax increases in 2 years, 1 for fire, 1 for schools, 1 for emergency services, and 1 for the library. Each tax increase tied the hands of the voters. Vote for the increase or lose 80 teachers, lose CPR training, lose emergency services. $10 million were abated in one city alone, $6 million just for schools. Since KFEDA negotiates tax abatements and have already passed HB 775, which allows for up to 50 years of tax breaks on equipment, construction materials, and utilities, our county should plan for a tax loss, not a windfall. We need a moratorium. We need a moratorium to better understand the overall financial landscape, ensuring that this data center won't receive excessive breaks, putting the financial burden on the residents of Mercer County. Having shared this cautionary tale, I ask the board, what's the rush? Why is the board spot zoning an ordinance of this magnitude? Why is this board not protecting prime farmland with this ordinance? Why is this board pursuing an ordinance not in the comprehensive plan? And why were the protective elements in the KRC model ordinance left out? I once again ask for a moratorium so that we, the people of Mercer County, are not taken advantage of, so our resources aren't abused, and so we can maintain the aesthetic of this amazing countryside. We don't need them, but they need us to be naive, and Mercer County is anything but.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Graves. I'm here representing Kentucky Resources Council. We're a 501c3 environmental law nonprofit. You should have received our comments last week. We also provided a model ordinance on data centers. And I also come as a passionate citizen from Fayette County whose grandfather helped preserve Shaker Village. I'm not an attorney. I'm here on a personal and a professional basis. I want to reiterate what Hank Grady said. The process is backwards. You need to look at the planning process first, look at your comprehensive plan, update it, and then consider an ordinance, an IT ordinance. Regarding the, should I keep going? Regarding our comments from Byron Gary, who is an attorney who looked at the ordinance you have created. Byron asked me to emphasize that additional consideration is needed of and limits to the noise impacts of the data centers, and particularly the low frequency noise, as many people have mentioned, including Mr. Grady. Also, we want to emphasize again that there need to be limits on operation and setbacks of on-site generators. That language definitely needs to be strengthened. On-site generators can be a significant source of noise and air pollutants, contributing to health and environmental impacts in surrounding communities. Number 3, the ordinance should address heat impacts. As other people have mentioned, the waste heat from these buildings is considerable. Number 4, decommissioning plans for equipment needs to be considered. Other people have mentioned that as well. And number 5, the impacts on local utilities such as water and electricity, which others have mentioned. Again, thank you for your efforts. We hope you will consider reversing the process, going back to the comprehensive plan, doing the planning, then if you decide to go forward, to create a stronger ordinance. Thank you, and please see our comments from Kentucky Resources Council.
Thank you. Rick Angel will be after her.
I'm a little short. I'm Deborah Klinkner, Klinkner, and my address is 987 Curry Pike in Harrisburg. right behind Sean's farm. I'm going to start off repeating the overall goal of the comprehensive plan is to promote a natural and man-made environment that balances environmental protection, preservation with the physical, social, economic needs of the population for the long-term benefit of both. Now, in reviewing the ordinance, it's worded so loosely and very few enforcement teeth on it, especially on the environmental issues. I noticed that the term may is used often in resolving issues, but may does not have any enforcement of anything. It's just you may do it or may not. Also, best management practices is used a lot. What if they aren't good enough? And the term adverse impacts that can't be avoided is used. That's a term that, do we end up, is there a line drawn, or does the county suffer? Also, the assessment shall state the impact of the proposed use on the comprehensive plan conflicts and shall identify mitigation measures that, again, may be taken and may does not require action. Several issues I found not addressed. The removal of abandoned facilities, which has been discussed. Also, one thing I wondered is what recourse do we have when our property value has dropped, and we can't sell, we can't do anything. And a lot of us, our property is the inheritance of our children. I think the most important thing, which has been discussed, low-level frequency requirements was totally omitted. While high frequency is allowed, but it's at much higher rates, it should be, even that should be at a lower level. The low level is harmful to animals, humans, and everything. And the location of the data center is close to Shaker Village, and their animals and tourism business, along with several other large horse farms and breeding farms and training. This level of noise pollution will have very negative effects on their businesses. Sadly, it seems like you have put more effort into requiring visual attributes to the data center, as in the requirement for the surface color facades shall be used to match the color schemes associated with Shaker Village, that there is a lot less effort in protecting Shaker Village and the surrounding horse farms from actually being physically harmed by the environmental pollution that will be generated. Understanding is that you couldn't find the research on low frequency. And it's completely, instead of calling for the magistrates to impose a moratorium so that higher quality research can be completed, there are requirements placed on all issues. We expect and demand quality requirements, enforcement capabilities from planning and zoning, not just hoping that best management practices will be good enough not to harm our county. Thank you.
Rick Angel, Cindy Angel will be in here.
Hello, Dr. Rick Angel, 1305 Handy Road, Harrisburg, Kentucky. As a medical doctor, my biggest concern about data centers has been noise, and I want to talk a little bit about noise more on a medical level, specifically low-frequency noise. With industrial age, we've started years ago looking at sound, but it was focused on sound that we can hear. Medium and high-frequency sound, for simplicity, we'll call that normal sound. And so all the guidelines we've had have been aimed at protecting the ears from hearing loss. The decibel that you normally will hear and you have on an app on your phone, it is only the medium and high frequency sound. It filters out the low frequency sound. And that was great because it helped people protect their ears. A few years ago, they started noticing other elements of sound, and it was initially probably more often in airport ground crews that the hearing level sound was not what was causing problems. It was the low frequency sound. And now with the advent of the data centers, it is becoming more of a public concern because they put out low frequency sound 24/7. Now I want to talk a little bit about what happens. Normal frequency sound is how many cycles per second is what a hertz is. The higher the frequency, the lower the wavelength. So sound that we can hear has little wavelengths. It's teeny little waves about the size of a marble that have very little energy. So when they encounter a barrier, it's like taking a pebble and throwing it against a wall. It just stops it. Even the air, molecules in the air will dissipate the noise of sound that we can hear. Well, the trouble with low frequency sound, these are very powerful, long waves. They can have a wavelength of 60 feet. They are pressure, very powerful waves. They're more like a wrecking ball. When they encounter a barrier, they either go around or over top or around, but they basically pass right through barriers with almost no dissipation of their energy level. They can travel 2+ miles with almost no loss of their energy. So that's one of the reasons it's so concerning. Now, sound has a purpose. In our ears, we have little receptors in every part of our body. When these little teeny wavelengths come in, our body says, oh, there's something going on. It releases a chemical that tells the brain, we hear that. And that's great for hearing, for feeling wind on your skin. The problem is these receptors, called mechanoreceptors for what it's worth, they live everywhere in the body. And just like the low frequency sound can penetrate barriers, they penetrate our body. So we have these receptors in internal organs that normally are not exposed to this, that are getting constant 24-hour stimulation. It feels like they're being pulled and tugged, and it creates a chemical response. The body feels like it is being attacked, and it really doesn't like that. So it does changes. It releases chemicals. You've heard of the fight or flight response. That is one of the things that's triggered. Just like a muscle pumps up when you lift weights, these constant receptors cause changes in tissue. And it's well documented, hundreds and hundreds of studies. You get thickening of the pericardium or the lining of the heart, you get thickening of heart valves, you get thickening of the walls of blood vessels, you get thickening in tissues in the lung that need to do other things. 24/7. The ordinance that you all have proposed, which is the standard for many years, was only looking at the regular sound, the A-weighted decibels. The problem is that does not measure any of the low frequency sound at all. None of the protective mechanisms such as barriers and berms, they are totally ineffective against low frequency sound. Just for context, in this calendar year, there have been, not calendar year, in 2026, there's been 2 lawsuits where data centers, as part of a response and a settlement on a lawsuit of low frequency sound affecting residents, have closed their doors. There was one in Tennessee and one in North Dakota.
Your time has expired.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cindy Angel. I live at 1305 Handy Pike, Harrodsburg, Kentucky. I just want to tag team a little bit on my husband and what he was talking about with the low frequency sound waves. I am a pediatric physical therapist. I've been practicing for 39 years. Kendall was one of my babies years ago.
I just asked Crimson as she was leaving, they go to Bergen School. And there's about 500 students at Bergen, and there are probably 100 students that have IEPs, that might have special needs. I work with fragile children, medically fragile children, that have often sensory regulation issues, autism. We've talked about low-frequency sound waves and how that impacts them. So the Brown Power Plant is less than 5 miles from Bergen School. So we can imagine the impact that those kids would have, at least during the school day, not to mention the kids that live in that area. So that is definitely a concern. We live on Handy Pike, close to Shakertown Road, at the end of Handy Pike. We live in a house that was built in 1791. We're on the Mercer County Historical Registry. The original farm was where Boone's Cave was, the sign you see on 68. It is said that our property is actually one of the first settlements even before Fort Herrick. So we have a very historic home that means a lot to us, for sure. We have horses. We're concerned about the sound waves. We're concerned about all the impacts that we've all talked about. I respect the fact that you all have a difficult job. I'm sure that you never imagined when you're appointed to this position that you would encounter a data center and that might happen to us. I think that, we've talked about the comprehensive plan and what that means, the historical value of our community, the tourism, the agriculture. We have an opportunity now to make history. You all have an opportunity to make history, and that you're in a position to protect our community, your neighbors, the health and welfare for your community, and the future of our generations. So we respectfully request a moratorium to protect that. Thank you.
Steer, like you drive your car.
Steer.
Yeah. Or like a longhorn. Some people say a cow, but a cow is not steer. I'm not
My name is Emily Steer, S-T-E-E-R, just like the longhorn. And I am here representing Mallard Cove, which is located off of Purdsville Road. We are less than 2 miles, probably less than 1.5 miles from the entrance of KU. If it's okay, I'll read this letter that we prepared. To whom it may concern, this was Mallard Cove Homeowners Association resolution, dated April 26, 2026. To whom it may concern, on April 26, 2026, the Mallard Cove Homeowners Association unanimously passed a resolution opposing any proposed text amendments to the Mercer County Land Use Plan or county zoning ordinances that would allow the construction of a hyperscale data center in Mercer County. Mallard Cove Homeowners Association represents 56 homeowners, hardworking, tax-paying, and voting families in Mercer County, and while land use plans are subject to periodic updates, adding a text amendment that would allow hyperscale data centers directly contradicts the rural, agricultural, and historical character of our county. This concern is especially acute regarding any zoning amendment that would allow development of a hyperscale data center anywhere near the E.W. Brown generating plant. Mercer County Homeowners Association is situated on Harrington Lake within a few miles of the plant, as are several other subdivisions in Shaker Village. A zoning amendment that would allow a hyperscale facility within our county would significantly harm our neighborhood, lake resources, and historical heritage. Mercer County presents unusually high land use sensitivity at this intersection of prime farmland, rural communities, Harrington Lake, utility infrastructure, and Shaker Village heritage tourism. Based on the material harm that such development could have, the MCHOA does not support any proposed amendment to support hyperscale data centers. Please be advised that we will use every available means collectively and individually to prevent a hyperscale data center from being built in Mercer County. Thank you for recognizing and acknowledging the position of the MCHOA regarding this matter.
Best regards, and our president, Walter L. Gross, has signed it. And I've included the resolution addendum, and I'll provide that to Kylie. And I want to say I appreciate what you all are taking time to listen to us. I'm really pleased to see how many community members are coming out and being involved. And I'm sure you don't see this at many of your meetings. So I want you to know, we know you do a hard job. And you probably don't hear from us so often. But this is something evidently that's very important to us Mercer County residents. One other thing I wanted to ask you about is, or point out, I haven't heard anybody speak in support of a data center in Mercer County tonight. Where are the supporters? Who wants this? Why aren't they talking? So I wanted to add that, and support. Well, I guess I'll leave it there, but thank you. I appreciate your all's time and consideration.
Jeff Scott will be up here.
I'm not going to mess this thing up for everybody else, so I'm just going to take it out of this. Hey, everybody, how you doing? First of all, I want to thank you guys for taking the opportunity to hear from the community. Roger Johnson. I'm on 500 Ashley. That's in Harrisburg. All right. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank you all for speaking with the community on this and working hard to come up with something that everybody can agree on, or at the very least has been very, very well considered. I appreciate that you guys are having a second meeting on this with plans to potentially have a third if necessary. And I just want you guys to know that that's seen. I'd like to start by saying I think that we should adopt a moratorium on the data center. Now, I'm not anti-tech, I'm not anti-data center. I'm just looking at this from a risk management position. So from here on out, I'm going to go for my bullets and points. Most of these have been touched on already, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. Okay? Data center development is a rapidly changing industry with evolving infrastructure, power demands, and operational standards. That creates a regulatory challenge. Fixed ordinances quickly become outdated, and for that reason, approvals should be granted through conditional use permits. This ensures ongoing monitoring, enforces compliance, and allows standards to adapt as impacts become clearer. Without that flexibility, Mercer County risks approving infrastructure it cannot effectively regulate as conditions change. A moratorium would give time for Mercer County to fully investigate and establish reasonable parameters specific to our county. End-of-life waste and decommissioning are not properly addressed in this current ordinance. Data centers generate significant electronic waste as equipment becomes obsolete. Our ordinances should require certified recycling, take-back programs, documented chain of custody standards. We also need to plan for closure. If market conditions change or a facility shuts down, what happens to the site and the neighbors nearby? IT zones should require a written bond-funded decommissioning plan so residents are not left with the burden of higher costs, lost land, and abandoned infrastructure. While the proposed ordinance includes some solid operating standards, it does not establish regular reporting schedules or clear penalties for noncompliance. I am urging you to ensure that these regulations and penalties be included in the final draft of this ordinance to ensure that lasting damages will equate to serious repercussions. Ensuring a thriving future for Mercer County depends on getting this decision right. I ask that you adopt a moratorium until a strong, enforceable ordinance built on conditional use permits is in place. Protect our people, our animals, and our land. Thank you for your time, your effort, and your consideration.
Jim Scott and Bethany Correa.
Hello, my name is Jeff Scott.
I reside at 2255 Oregon Road in South Lisa. I'm an industrial engineer by education and have previously worked in construction management projects, industrial in nature, for over 30 years. Upon my review of the draft ordinance posted on the Planning Commission's website, I have several concerns. Mercer County's draft failed to address 6 concerns that I picked up, but many others been talked about here tonight. One thing I want to mention is the lady that spoke earlier about the Kentucky Resource Council and some of the guidance documents that they have made available to all 120 counties in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. That guidance document, Model Data Center Siting Ordinance, version 1.4, that was issued in January 2026, as well as recent precautionary measures that other communities around the U.S. are taking to protect their communities from the onslaught of data center development. One thing that KRC's ordinance referenced 2 terms that Mercer County's ordinance failed to mention: farmland of statewide importance or prime farmland. In a county where agriculture is so important to the financial health of the community, it is troubling that this was not included anywhere in Mercer County's draft ordinance. Number 2, there is no language included to regulate the possible installation of on-site power generation. Why is this important? There is definitely a growing trend in the data center development for on-site power generation. Some of you might know of some of the issues that the community of Memphis is going through from Elon Musk's data center power generation, and how that was kind of sidestepped the review process that the PSC has for KU and other utility providers. Since this is a not-for-sale utility that is owned by the data center, it sidesteps that review process. And I believe the Kentucky Resource Council has provided some cautionary advisement in that. Also, there's no language in respect to SMRs. What are SMRs? Small modular reactors. If you don't think this is a real risk, listen to the Piketon, Ohio data center plan for 16 SMRs, small modular nuclear reactors. I don't want to be a guinea pig, and hopefully most of Mercer County doesn't want to be a guinea pig for that technology. Also, there's no language in respect to waste heat beyond the perimeter of the data center property line, even though the KRC guided document references that. And lastly, on the clean energy language within the draft ordinance is extremely vague. Working in industrial construction, that language is, you might as well just wad it up and throw it away. It is not binding and controlling. Lastly, no cost burden language in respect to providing infrastructure and power supply. A lot of communities are now putting language in, bring your own power. And what that means is 100% cost responsibility of providing electrical supply and water supply into these data centers and not putting that burden onto the citizens of the community. Thank you for listening to my concerns in consideration and revising the current draft ordinance to better protect our community. Based off of my construction experience, I would class this ordinance at maybe a 30% ready document. This is far from being ready to be put in place. Thank you.
Heather will be after her.
All right, you should have a copy of my written supplement containing references and recommended addendums to the single bullet point in the ordinance for emergency and fire response. My name is Bethany Correa, and I live at 226 Curdsville Road in Bergen. As a former volunteer firefighter, I have an intimate understanding of emergency response. Due to a distinct lack of cohesive incident reporting, expert third-party assessment should be conducted. Nationally, data centers withhold the vital information needed to write safe fire codes and protocols. Data centers are massive with complex floor plans requiring firefighters to have extensive and ongoing training. First responders are often held up by security guards for up to an hour outside the facilities, allowing emergent conditions to escalate. Data centers rely on lithium-ion batteries. These fires are not extinguished by standard fire suppression methods and thus are extremely difficult to put out. Thermal runaway occurs when a single overheated battery catches fire near surrounding batteries, leading to a monstrous cascade of fire. In recent years, almost every significant data center fire involved lithium-ion batteries. Lee Kaiser, fire protection engineer, stated, "It's my personal opinion that the battery manufacturers jumped the gun without speaking about safety steps they would need to take." Data center fires are not isolated incidents. As data centers grow in size and complexity, as in a hyperscale facility, so do the risks. To complicate matters, current research on the causes and the full scope of the consequences of data center fires is severely lacking. As a county with volunteer fire services, we are at a distinct disadvantage in personnel, equipment, and resources. Individual fire departments experience multiple lights and sirens responses to data centers each month. Due to the complexity of these emergencies, these calls often require extensive hours on site, sometimes over 24 hours for one incident. Those are precious hours that resources are unavailable to the community. Washington Township Fire Department in Ohio is ranked as the gold standard in fire safety and training and now has experience with data centers. Their fire chief has repeatedly voiced concerns on losses in adequate funding and the strains on their resources. They have an increased reliance on surrounding fire departments to provide mutual aid. So I ask you this, have you consulted with the surrounding county's fire departments? Because they will inevitably be affected by a data center. All of these jurisdictions will require specialized and ongoing training as all of their firefighters' lives will be at risk. Fire Chief Stewart of Jerome Township, Ohio stated, "Over the past 3 to 4 years, we have continuously advised Amazon and your contractors of these issues, and it has fallen on deaf ears. The very lives of your employees and the lives of my firefighters are at stake, and no one at AWS seems to care." Allowing data centers to set the standard of what is safe is not acceptable. Time and time again, they have dismissed feedback and concerns. Fire chiefs across the nation are sounding the alarm that they are losing the precious time and resources necessary to respond to their communities. Do not let their voices fall upon deaf ears in Mercer County. Meeting the minimum standards without expert independent consultation is unacceptable. To truly be safe, we must plan for every contingency and have the facilities, personnel, equipment, and training to respond. Planning that cannot be achieved in a few mere months. That is the minimum our firefighters and citizens deserve. To protect the lives of our citizens and our firefighters, I must insist that we continue to request a moratorium. Thank you.
Jackie Taylor. Lisa Patterson will be after Jackie Taylor. Lisa Patterson. Angela Lee will be after Lisa.
I'm sitting a while. Okay. We moved to Handy Pike when I was a small child. My mother and father raised me and four children.
Name and address for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa Patterson, 2408 Lexington Road, Harrisburg, Kentucky. I have a house in town at 435 Tavler Avenue. Okay. We moved to Handy Pike when I was a very small child. My mother and father raised me and 3 younger siblings there. We each had a pony and we rode over every inch of that farm. We raised lambs and calves with bottles. We rode ponies as fast as they would go. Through corn rows, we jumped feeding troughs, we jumped out of the hayloft. My nieces and nephews still raise calves with the bottle and run every inch of Fairview Farm. Most of our family gatherings are outside in the yard. We enjoy the peace at Fairview, and we hear the distant train at night when the world goes quiet. And in the 60s, my mother, Carolyn Sue Patterson, asked Representative I.C. James to put forth a law that kept the train from blocking the crossings more than 5 minutes. Her 4 mischievous children were divided, and half the town were divided from the hospital for emergency situations. She recently told me this story. In the 1870s, when the fathers of the town heard that the train was coming to Harrodsburg, everybody thought it was wonderful, and they decided to put the train on the outskirts of the town. The train came, the town grew, and it grew around the outskirts of the town. The town outgrew the train. The town thought, okay, the train came. More than 100 years later, we're still dealing with the consequences. The law makes no difference. The law of 5 minutes at the crossings, only 5 minutes at crossings, doesn't make any difference. They want, the train is like the data center. The train will do what the train wants. The data center will too. Harrodsburg's too small for a data center, and the data center will boss us around. I ask for a moratorium.
Angela Lee.
Mr. Chair, we've learned that Ms. Lee had to leave, and I think we have some written comments from her that will become part of the record.
Thank you, Henry. Josh Jackson. Betty Dean will be after Josh.
My name is Josh Jackson, 361 Old Brown Road, Sylvester. So my main concern with this data center, I'm a born and raised resident here, so I've been here for 40 years. My main concern is with the water and electricity costs. I guess it's going to be a relatively inelastic demand for as far as water is concerned and electricity. With this data center, we're going to see a very large increase, I think, or shift in our demand curve. So our usage is actually fairly inelastic. By that I mean, with large changes in price, there's going to be a small decrease in usage. We have to use what we have to use for electricity. We have to use for water. And so I think we're seeing something similar with oil. We see a major disruption right now with oil. We'll see a major disruption, I think, with our power and water bills when this comes to town. And so that's my main concern from all the residents across here, is that we're going to see just a dramatic increase in our power and water bills. And it's a double whammy. And the fact that we'll have to pay an increase in prices, but we'll also have to pay an increase in our taxes on that as well. So it's kind of a double whammy, the fact that we'll have to see that increase in price and increase in taxes on that percentage of what we're paying. So I think that will be a major deleterious impact for a lot of our residents here in the county. Another concern of mine is, we're taking some of our most prime agricultural land, and you look at Web and Soil Survey, and so I'm down in Salvaz, and I know the production up here as far as agricultural production, on a per acre basis, it'd be probably at least double, maybe sometimes even triple of what is in Salvaz, just the quality of land that we have up here. And so I know if we're taking our prime agricultural land, I would just like to see that being maintained in the agricultural land. And I think another concern I had is if these big companies, and they put their names everywhere, if they're not willing to put their name behind the data center, that's not something we want to have. Because they can't put their name behind it, they don't want to stand behind it, that's a major red flag. If they can't stand behind something they're trying to put in our community. Another concern, or another thought I had is, I think we need to make sure that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of a few billionaires. And so that, by that I mean, we need to make sure we follow the will of the people. We're a democratic republic. If this is something we really need to make sure that we're following all the Mercer County residents' desires, maybe it's something we need to put on the ballot somewhere. I don't know what it takes to put on a ballot, but if we need to say, hey, let's keep it simple, say, are you for or against a data center for like maybe 10 years or so? It's something I think we need to put on a ballot and to say, let the will of people help dictate what's being put forth, in my mind. If that's possible. I don't know whether it's possible or not, but I think maybe that could be an option, just to make sure that whatever's happening is going to reflect the will of people. Thank you.
After Betty will be Kara Mercer.
I'm Betty Dean. And I live at 551 Moore Lane, Harrisburg, Kentucky. I want to talk to you. I've heard so many serious challenges that are facing us, not just us out here, but you right there. Good grief. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you have such a terrible job right now. And I mean that. I can't imagine being in your seat. I've heard the serious challenges that I'm not denigrating a single one of them. They're real. But I want to offer you some help. If I were in your place, I'd be yelling help. We have been given gifts and opportunities for the journey through this life. And I want to talk to you about 3 of them. The first one that I would mention, and I hope I don't offend any of you, is the Bible, the Word of God. There's a lot in there about stewardship. And I commend you for listening to ideas about stewardship of the land. You've heard them, and you were very polite when you listened. The second one is kids, our kids. Our responsibilities and our opportunities go together with them. You know, they are flesh of our flesh, bone of our bone, blood of our blood. All of us, every part of us, in a new little body with a new beating heart. We have some responsibilities to them, and they have some responsibilities and opportunities to make us better. Other than those 2 things, the other thing that I would mention as a gift, an opportunity, and a responsibility is our soil, our land. You know, there's nothing on this earth more precious as a resource than land. You know, we put a seed in the ground and it becomes a living plant, and that plant feeds our animals and it feeds us. And that cycle repeats year after year. And it has done so for thousands of years, thousands. It is the way humanity has fed itself over the centuries. I hope that you will understand that as a sustainable source. Think about that history. That is a sustainable source. In contrast to what I've read about unsustainable data centers, I hear that within 5 years, many of them will be obsolete. I hear that there are alternative plans for them right now. As of August 26th, one of the alternative plans is going into operation, and that's the undersea data center, which will not need not need cooling like the ones that you've heard about today. We must protect our land from these monsters. Every day I'm reading about places in other states where they are, where the citizens are in an uproar. Their outcry is all over
Ma'am, your
the
time
paper.
has expired. Thank you.
Thank you.
Former Mercer.
I'm gonna make sure you can hear me first. All right, so my name is Carla Kurtzinger. I am here to piggyback off my sister Katrina Sexton, who is running for state representative to replace the current incumbent. You heard her tonight, so I'm gonna piggyback off what she brought for you. And then I'm gonna give you some data and some facts, okay? So like she said, HB 775 brought in our massive hyperscale data centers, and it was voted on and supported by our current representative, Kim King. We are not for data centers. Kentucky is farmland. Kentucky is one of the biggest areas of farmland this side of the Mississippi. So the data for you says Kentucky is over 50% farmland. And this is from our census from the Kentucky Agriculture Commission. Kentucky has that farmland for cattle, for poultry, for crops. Mercer County itself is in the top 25% of that farmland, 48% being crops. In the state of Kentucky, we have the top-ranked U.S. horse industry, and we have horse country that's going to be wrapped around where they propose to put this data center. Our growth shows that in 2022 Census of Agriculture, 56% increase in net cash from farm income. That's net cash. Mercer County is part of that. With this being said, when they brought in HB 775 to support the massive hyperscale data center developments, now our state legislature is trying to walk it back. And they're not able to do that because many of the things they've tried to pass in bills and legislature have not gone through. I want to reiterate this is in an election year. I want to ask that our Planning and Zoning Board take on the responsibility that our state legislature has failed to do for Mercer County. I want you to consider everyone who has spoken here, whether it's part of the record or not, because some of the data I just gave is not going to be part of your record, but it's been spoken out loud. I want Kentucky to follow suit just like the state of Maine and to ban data centers. We are farmland. We are Mercer County. We are Kentucky. And just like my sister Katrina Sexton said, take the dollars out of it, put some cents back into it. Respectfully, we ask for a moratorium. And more personally, I'm going to ask you to be sensible and make the decision not to change the zoning of our agricultural land. Thank you.
Harriet Ruby, 528 Beaumont Avenue, Harrisburg. I'm a seventh generation Mercer Countyan. My ancestor, Peter Ruby, came to this area with James Harris. Family stories tell us one reason they stayed was because of the wonderful water. This is our water today before David Zimmer. A friend from Georgia who lives close to a data center brought me this. This is her water. I don't want to drink it. Do you? Thank you.
Galen Waterfield. Yes.
My name's Dallas Slaughterfield. I live at 305 Jim Forsyth Lane, Harrisburg. I haven't really known about this thing for some time. But if you just stop and listen, you hear the noise? You hear this noise? How much noise, what is the decibel level for this new data center? You all have any proof of that? How much it is? How much it's going to affect the brain of the animals or the people that live? What is the radius output of this noise it's going to put out? We don't need that in this county. If you want to get to a person, you take his water away from him, you take his food source away from him, and he will starve. These people, they go hungry, they will get fighting mad over it. I know I would. I tell you, this modern technology is something else. We just don't need this thing. It's how's it going to? The Bible talks about the cattle on 1,000 hills. I don't know whether any of y'all know about that verse in the Bible. The cattle on 1,000 hills. We are to take care of the cattle on 1,000 hills. We are to take care of our neighbors, our loved ones. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I spent a year in Vietnam. I know what war does to a country. It's terrible. I know what it's like to be shot at. It ain't fun. But I'm telling you the truth. We live in the greatest nation on God's green earth. And we want to protect it. Protect it. Protect it. I don't know how many veterans are in this congregation or this building tonight. But I tell you what, so proud to wear the uniform of the United States military. It's so good to be a free American. God bless them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waterfield. And we appreciate your service. This will conclude the public hearing testimony. Committee members were also provided with written documents, typed documents that were entered into the office, and those documents will be made a public record, part of the public hearing. If there's not any other documents to be presented, I'll need a motion to conclude this public hearing and this special call meeting. Is there some movement or a motion? I have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. No discussion. All in favor say aye. All opposed, like sign. This meeting and public hearing is now adjourned.
Hi everyone, this is Corey Rainey with Hyped Up TV. Just want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. Really appreciate you all. Really appreciate the help from Keith Reitmeyer with Harrodsburg History. Make sure to go like and subscribe to their Facebook page, and be sure to follow us on YouTube. And if there is a third meeting, we do hope to be able to bring it to you. But we appreciate you tuning in tonight, and we appreciate all the people that came here to speak, and look forward